Chapter 885. Bojio arched a brow, her fingers moving. When she flipped over, her clothes fluttered in the wind, swapping their positions suavely. She seemed excited and mischievous. "Do you want a kiss?" Chin Mo glanced at the person pressing down on his shoulder, his eyes sweeping downwards. "Are you trying to avoid my question?" "What question?" Bojio glanced at the Almighty's expression. "I was just provoking young Master Jiang to prevent Yao Yao from being taken advantage of in the future. It isn't easy to survive in a wealthy family. I'm just being considerate for my team member. If you're in a bad mood, it might affect tomorrow's competition." Chin Mo glanced at her. "Does that mean you're in the right?" "Humility is a virtue." Bojio smiled, enjoying the feeling of being pressed against the wall. Everyone knew about the high-speed rail station. There weren't any blind spots. This position could be temporarily invisible, but it was impossible to be invisible forever. The passers-by glanced over instinctively. Gossiping was human nature. For example, they were now very clear in their hearts. How could a beautiful young man press a very imposing man against the wall? Bojio enjoyed the gazes as it proved that she was better than the Almighty in certain aspects. Right? Due to the difference in height, Chin Mo had to lower his lids when he looked at the youngster. His gaze swept over her curved lips, his voice calm. "Since that's the case, let's go back to the previous question. What if I say yes? What do you want?" Bojio hadn't reacted. Just then, someone pressed down on the brim of her hat, lifted her up, and kissed her. The tip of her tongue entered, the slightly cold minty tobacco scent sucking in all the air. Bojio's hat was obviously useful. It could cover their faces. But because of that, no one would disturb them. The kiss lasted for a long time, making her blood race. When the sound of her heart rang, he pressed his lips against hers and gently kissed her twice. His voice traveled over kiss. Bojio felt that she was at a disadvantage this time. The kiss she had imagined wasn't supposed to be like this. She had already pressed the Almighty against the wall. Shouldn't she be the one in control? Fortunately, the kiss ended. It wasn't just Supreme Alliance's group. Lin Shintao's group had arrived as well. Just as Lin Feng was about to buy a bottle of water from the vending machine, he saw something he shouldn't have seen. The naive and innocent him was stunned. He forgot to move. Chin Mo glanced over, his gaze cold. Lin Feng immediately came back to his senses. With a serious expression, he said, "Leader, I didn't see anything. You guys can continue. You guys can continue." After saying that, he immediately turned around and left, not even taking the mineral water from the vending machine. But in his heart, it was as if 10,000 alpacas were running. Do you know that imagining it is one thing and seeing it with your own eyes is another? Captain and Little Spade, 2 men, F***CK. This was a devastating scene for a straight man. He felt that his wife was leaving him. What was going on? What was going on? But could it be because both of them were very handsome? He actually found it a little pleasing to the eye. Mainly, Little Spade was too daring. He actually kissed the captain forcefully in a corner. Chapter 886. When Yinhu saw Lin Feng was in such a state. He seemed to be in a daze, and his face was obviously red. "Didn't you go to buy water? Where's the water?" With Yinhu's reminder, Lin Feng remembered that he hadn't taken the mineral water, but he couldn't explain the reason. He sat on the chair and shut his eyes. "I'm not thirsty anymore." The person who had been asking for water wasn't thirsty anymore. Yinhu arched a brow, but didn't expose him. When he glanced up, he saw the two of them walking over from the direction a certain someone had come from. His voice was filled with understanding. "Did you see something you shouldn't have?" Everyone knew how naive Lin Feng was. He jumped immediately. His gaze came into contact with Yunhu's face, especially when he saw the beautiful shape of his thin lips. For some reason, he felt a little awkward. He asked in a rough voice, "What can I see?" With that, he sat back down. Unfortunately, someone came to expose him. "Senior, you forgot your water." It was Bojio. She sat beside Lin Feng, her voice soft. "Did you get a shock?" Lin Feng wanted to reply, but when he met Yinhu's gaze, he pulled her to the side. "When did you and Captain progress so quickly? You even kissed, you saw wrongly." Boju arched a brow. The Almighty was warning me not to flirt. Lin Feng pouted. I saw wrongly? Do you think your big brother is blind? Kissing is kissing. I still have that much tolerance. But how did you manage to get the captain? That's too amazing. Why? Boju laughed lightly. Are you going to use the same trick on Almighty Yin? Lin Feng covered her mouth. Don't spout nonsense. I was just chatting casually. Why are you so agitated? Boju moved his hand away, a playful smile on her face. That wasn't a casual chat. With the two of them guiding him, Lin Feng felt uncomfortable no matter what. Why wasn't the bus checking the ticket yet? He decided that he would sit next to anyone but Yun Hu. Otherwise, his imagination would run wild, and his imagination would run wild. On the other side of the waiting room was Lin Chintao's team. It was different from Supreme Alliance's free-range policy. Almost all of them were sitting in a row, wearing the same attire and sitting posture. With the club's agent and assistant leading the way, the atmosphere was very strong. However, the atmosphere was too tense. Even someone as talkative as Lin Chintao didn't come over to greet Boju. Instead, he glanced over. There seemed to be a lot of things to say in that one glance. It was really hard on his chatterbox. Boju stuffed a hand into her pocket, the candy in her mouth. When she bit down, she realized that her lips were slightly swollen. She licked them, and when she met the Almighty's gaze, she stretched. She was used to being free and unrestrained. She really didn't fit in with a professional esports team that had strict control. It could only be said that their styles were not the same. Boju hadn't expected him to come out of such a place. Now, it seemed that this was not the case. The teams were already calling out names. If anyone was late, the consequences would be unthinkable. Even Lin Chuntao became extremely calm at this moment. Chapter 887. Rao Rong was still the same as before, sitting at the front of the team. It was obvious that most of the team respected him, especially Lin Chintao. He was practically reliant on him. But why was his whereabouts so suspicious? And was it really a coincidence that he had appeared at the cinema yesterday? Boju pondered over the matter, her gaze meeting Rao Rong's. Through the crowd, Rao Rong's gaze deepened. He must have sensed someone looking at him. Boju smiled, unperturbed. Rao Rong's expression didn't change. He averted his gaze and lowered his gaze. In reality, Rao Rong had never intended to guard against her. He had placed all his precautions on Qin and Mo. After yesterday's incident, Rao Rong finally understood how dangerous profiling was for them. Rao Rong wouldn't show it no matter how bad his mood was. Even though he wasn't sure what was going on, he didn't show it. His phone was ringing, and it was obvious who had sent the message. Rao Rong didn't turn his phone on, his gaze on his manager as he listened to the rest of the team. But things didn't always go smoothly for a famous team. For example, the competition. All the playing order was determined by the club's coach, as well as the people above. For the first match of the 1v1, everyone assumed Rao Rong would be the one to fight. After all, he was the only one who could go toe-to-toe with Qin and Mo. But Supreme Alliance wasn't aware of it. The club handed the 1v1 match over to a very young person who liked to play as a warrior. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes as he swept Rao Rong a glance. Lifting his chin, he accepted the responsibility. Lin Chuntao wanted to stand up when he saw the outcome. Rao Rong reached out to press him down, his voice calm. Don't let Supreme Alliance see the conflict between us. Lin Chuntao tightened his fists, turning his head and punching him viciously. He really did not expect that one day the captain would receive such treatment. How could the new be win the 1v1? Was it because his father was an investor? Lin Chuntao was infuriated, the anger emanating from his body. His eyes turned red, but he remained silent. Sometimes, even in esports, someone had to compromise in order to keep the team going. And that person had always been the one who had sacrificed more for the team. This atmosphere did not last long. Fortunately, the ticketing on the high-speed rail had already begun, so the conflict did not intensify. Rao Rong was the first to stand up, followed by his teammates. The two teams met at the ticket gate. Sparks flew from the collision. Even before the match began, there was already the momentum of a dragon and tiger fighting for supremacy. Neither of the two captains was weak. It was the same for the team members. Everyone knew that this would be the most anticipated match in the national finals. The confrontation between Rao Rong and Qin Mo. The confrontation between Lin Chuntao and Bo Jiu. Who was the strongest leader? Who was the strongest assassin? Which team was more qualified to challenge Xiangnan? This battle was of utmost importance. Due to the strong presence of the two teams and the fact that they were all young and handsome, the two teams were too eye-catching. Many people in the queue were watching. Compared to the other party, Supreme Alliance obviously didn't have any commercial organizations following them. Qin Mo said, "Let's go." Chapter 888. It was a 3-hour journey. At the start, Lin Chuntao had intended to cause a ruckus in Spade Z's carriage. But now he wasn't in the mood. He glanced out the window, and when he couldn't take it anymore, he turned towards Rao Rong. "Captain, Lin Nua's skills aren't enough to stop Qin Mo. If we send him out first, we will definitely lose." Rao Rong stopped drinking, twisting the bottle cap. "Don't worry. Qin Mo won't be participating in the 1v1. I'm guessing they will be fighting a 2v2. 2v2? Lin Chuntao was shocked. Qin Mo has never fought a 2v2. Rao Rong chuckled lightly. "That was in the past. Don't we have Spade Z now? Why don't we have a 2v2 as well?" Lin Chuntao almost jumped in excitement. "I definitely won't drag down Captain's fighting strength." Next, it was another round of nagging. Most of them were talking about how he would specially target Little Spade after the competition started and how he was the most handsome person in esports. He watched as the person beside him returned to his usual self. Rao Rong glanced into the distance. Sometimes it was troublesome, but it was the best. Lin Feng, who was in the other carriage, wasn't feeling as good. He was frustrated. How hard was it to change seats? They weren't even on the same team, and he didn't know how to save him. He tilted his head, meeting Yunhu's gaze. Lin Feng's seat was near the window, making it inconvenient to leave. He grabbed a book and placed it on his face, preventing him from imagining something he shouldn't be imagining. Yunhu adjusted his seat, stood up, and headed towards the dining car. At least, that was how it looked to others. But in reality, he only left after the youngster left. Bo Jiu was smart. She stopped absent-mindedly when she noticed someone following behind her. She turned on the tap, pretending to wash her hands. When she glanced up, she caught sight of the person in the mirror. Yunhu wasn't tactful, his voice calm. What exactly happened when he went to buy water? Bo Jiu smiled devilishly, still wearing her hat. "Senior Lin, haven't you recovered?" "It's nothing, I just kissed Captain." No matter how composed Yunhu was, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. Bo Jiu leaned over. "This is good news for Almighty Yun. It has enlightened him. He will probably be thinking about this the entire night when his team is resting." Yunhu glanced at the youngster. "The next time you do anything with Captain, try to avoid it. That guy isn't like Captain. He doesn't have a strong mental endurance." Afraid of scaring him away, Bo Jiu smiled playfully. Yunhu didn't deny it. After he got the answer he wanted, he walked back to his seat and looked at Lin Feng for a moment. Then he sat down and lowered his voice. "It's just a kiss. Is it that serious? Those movies you watched in the past, are they all food for you?" Lin Feng pulled the book away from his face and thought to himself, F***CK. How can that be the same? What kind of film am I playing? What were they looking at now? I'm starting to doubt my life. Do you understand? But in the end, Lin Feng didn't say anything. He tilted his head and thought about life calmly. Chapter 889. Try what? After Lin Feng finished speaking, he coughed heavily. His expression was manly. F***CK. Why was he stuttering like baby Feng? He couldn't lose in terms of aura. Yunhu arched a brow. "What else can we try? Since you were so concerned about it, why don't you kiss me personally? Speaking of which, you still have your first kiss, right?" Lin Feng was on the verge of flipping the table. "Who are you looking down on? Who said I still have my first kiss? I have a girlfriend too." His few girlfriends. Everyone was well aware of this. They got close to him because of Yunhu. Lin Feng still remembered the last time he broke up with his girlfriend. It was because he saw her hugging Yun Hu's waist, her head tilted upwards as though she was about to kiss his chin. But even so, he had to maintain his image. Yun Hu's gaze sank in that instant. Even his voice wasn't the same as usual. That's all? With who? You don't have to worry about that. Lin Feng was serious. Don't say that I don't want to teach you. We're going to compete soon. Don't think so much nonsense. But Yun Hu insisted on this answer. With who? Lin Feng's eyes darted left and right. As a straight man, he would never admit defeat in front of other men. Hence, Lin Feng's face turned red as he lied. It's the girl who wanted to seduce you. Her? Yun Hu retracted his gaze. His fingers clenched tightly. Lin Feng felt that he had finally managed to deal with it. It was so embarrassing to have his act exposed. Phew! If Bojio was here, she would definitely say, Lin Feng, you naive boy, you're provoking him on purpose. It was a pity that Lin Feng didn't have such thoughts. After the conversation, the thoughts that had been troubling him didn't surface. He just tilted his head and fell asleep. The bathroom on the high-speed train was usually cleaner, especially since Jiang City was the first stop. Even if it wasn't clean, Bojio had to stay in there to receive a message. This wasn't a message she could receive in front of the Almighty. She had to hide in the washroom. Bojio glanced at her phone screen. It was an email, every word related to Rao Rong, including his background and his father's death. Bojio's fingers stilled, her eyes darkening as she replied. Focus on investigating Rao Rong's father's death. There's something fishy going on. In a high-rise apartment in the city center. On the screen, in the 5v5 hero arena, a red-clothed assassin swept his sword horizontally. When the announcement of 4 kills rang out, he jumped back, making it impossible for the person chasing after him to even catch a glimpse of his shadow. His gaze fell on the lit-up phone screen, and his beautiful, thin lips smiled. His face was clear and handsome, and his fingers moved slightly as he replied, Okay. On the game page, there were still people shouting, Almighty wait, add me as a friend. Hoshino had already exited the game, his fingers tapping on the keyboard as he opened an unknown forum. No one knew the existence of the forum. All IPs will be hidden. That place had the most perfect firewall. It could avoid all the Internet Surveillance Bureau's detection. That was one of Z's important ways to obtain information. The young lord of the hacker world wasn't just a joke, because the firewall here was made by Z himself. Chapter 890. Just like before, Hoshino contacted one of the hackers and got the information. Of course, the reward here wasn't money, but other things that the hacker needed. For example, protection. The true balance of the network needed protection, because some hackers didn't know what they were like in real life. They could be office workers who already had children, cashiers in internet cafes who cleaned their keyboards, or even otakus who liked to play games. But today, the forum was different. Z hadn't been logged in for a long time. Because it was grayed out, people would guess. Was the person who appeared recently Z? Some said yes, some said no. Different opinions. Hoshino looked at the content and didn't say anything. Because even if this was the world of hackers, not everyone in this world was harmless. He silently cast the net and retreated. There was a rule here, and that was to keep it a secret. There was a mess here, but no one dared to leak any information. This was because once the news got out, that person would definitely suffer the wrath of the entire hacker world. This was because this was where they had the most freedom. They still had a real life. And it was a matter of principle not to reveal each other's identities. It was because someone had leaked information about the people here that Z had built a firewall. No one could find the real IP address of the other party, unless Z went to check it himself. Back then, Z didn't go easy on the person who leaked information. After finding the real person, she dealt with him accordingly. To the hackers, the person who leaked information was undoubtedly an executioner. He wanted to use the information in exchange for some benefits, no matter how many people he would kill. And this person was none other than the girl's brother, the brother of the girl who impersonated Z. So, how could the girl not appear here? The girl was smart, and she never messed around in certain matters. But if she became Z, it would be different. As the owner of this place, she would have the right to listen to all the information. She had to be patient. Even if she wanted to take revenge on the hackers who said her skills weren't up to par, she had to endure it. Because she knew that now wasn't the right time. She had carefully prepared this plan for many years. It was to imitate first, and when the time was right, she could replace her. Another message appeared on the forum. Time passed little by little. When Bo Jio walked out of the bathroom, she saw Qin Mo standing at the end of the tunnel. The Almighty's words were always profound. For example, this time he glanced at the young man and said in a calm voice, "I thought you were going to stay in there for as long as the high-speed train takes and then disappear into thin air." Bo Jio smiled. "Brother Mo, you're overthinking. It's just an upset stomach. Is that so?" Qin Mo retracted his gaze, standing tall and straight. Even his back view seemed to have a deeper meaning. Usually, when the Almighty said, "Is that so?" it meant that he didn't believe her. It seemed like the Almighty's suspicions about her had never disappeared. He had to be more careful when he contacted Hoshino in the future. Nothing else happened during the rest of the journey. Because everyone was resting with their eyes closed, it was understandable that people would want to sleep at this time. Qin Mo sat beside the youngster, his eyes sweeping the youngster's side profile. His gaze flickered, but he didn't say anything, reaching out to hold the youngster's hand. Bo Jio was half asleep. It wasn't possible for her to pull her hand out. She couldn't fight the drowsiness, and when she tilted her head, it landed on Qin Mo's shoulder. This scene happened frequently. Logically speaking, the Supreme Alliance members were used to it. But Shui Yao Yao could see the difference. He felt that the two of them were getting closer. But at the same time, Almighty Qin seemed to be stricter with his supervision over Highness Jio. At around 4 p.m., the high-speed train arrived at the station. When the Supreme Alliance members walked out lazily, Lin Shintao's team was already at the exit. This was probably the difference between having a businessman and not having one. The car that came to fetch them was still a high-end business car. Lin Feng was emboldened, turning towards Bo Jio. "Little Spade, why don't you sit on Captain's thighs this time? You should cherish this opportunity." Bo Jio chewed on the lollipop, her lips lifting into a mischievous smile. "I'll pass. Senior Lin, why don't you sit on Almighty Yun's thighs to save space? Weren't you looking at Almighty Yun to find a chance to strike?" F***CK. "I'm a straight man. Why would I strike?" When Lin Feng said this, he averted his gaze. He didn't have the intention to attack Yunhu, but he did think about how a person like Yunhu would kiss. At the end of the day, the youngster in front of him had forcefully pushed Captain in that position. Most importantly, he had witnessed it. Lin Feng also made up his mind. It would be better to stay away from Little Spade and the team in the future. What if he got used to seeing her like this? No, that wasn't right. Why would a straight man like him get used to it? The naive Lin Feng was annoyed by Bo Jio's question. He pulled his hair with all his might. Bo Jio smiled devilishly. Did he really think that her dark history was that easy to talk about? This time, Yunhu didn't save Lin Feng because he felt that a certain someone should be nurtured in this aspect. It would also save him the trouble of giving kisses to random people in the future. The moment he thought about how those lips had kissed someone else and how those hands had hugged someone else, no matter how Yunhu tried to console himself, he couldn't feel happy. Perhaps this was the feeling of falling in love with a straight man. Because he will never fall in love with you. Even if he could endure it for a while for the sake of his brother, he could not endure it forever. After a long time, he probably wouldn't even be able to endure it anymore. Yunhu clenched his fists tightly, watching the scenery outside the window. His jaw tightened, and he remained silent. The Hotel Supreme Alliance stayed and was a local star-rated hotel. This was also Feng Yi's greatest success as a manager. Even though he wasn't there in person, everything else was well thought out. For example, this hotel had its own hot spring. Anyone who heard this would want to relax in the water before the match. Bo Jio was no exception. But just as the youth took a step forward, the back of his collar was grabbed by someone. Chapter 891. Lin Feng had wanted to place his hand on the youngster's shoulder, but when he heard his captain's words, he retracted his hand instantly. The others lifted their heads silently, watching the ceiling. Since they were in the hot spring alone, it was easy to misunderstand. Chinamo didn't bother looking at their expressions. He held onto the back of her collar with one hand, entering the other elevator. Did she know how easily they would be exposed for a hot spring bath together? She didn't even have that much self-awareness. How exactly had she managed to remain undiscovered? Chinamo glanced down, sweeping a glance at the face in his hand. Indeed, she didn't look like a girl. Mainly, she was overly handsome and had a mischievous look on her face. Brother Mo, aren't the hot springs located halfway up the mountain in the backyard? Bojo wanted to play with them. Her current hobby was to tease Senior Lin. It wasn't a good idea to follow the Almighty. Chinamo watched the numbers on the elevator, his side profile handsome. There's a high-end area. It's on the balcony. It's definitely expensive. Bojo shook her head. Deep down, she was delighted to be able to scam him. The elevator stopped. Chinamo took a step forward, his voice calm. It's fine, you can pay. Bojo, why are you still standing there? Chinamo arched a brow. Bojo decided to take the chance to educate the Almighty. Brother Imo, it's better to be more like a commoner. That's why you're paying. Chinamo held onto her hand. Lord Gio. Bojo didn't want to talk about how she felt when he called her that. She had to listen to him, even if she had to hold back her tears. The room was indeed good, worthy of the exorbitant price. The floor-to-ceiling windows were pulled open, revealing the hot spring outside the balcony. It was still too early to soak in the hot spring. It was obvious that Chinamo hadn't asked her to come up alone to soak in the hot spring. He unzipped his uniform, glancing up at the youngster, his handsome features distinct. Shall we have a 1v1? The Almighty wanted a 1v1? This was a rare opportunity. Bojo sat with her legs crossed, a devilish smile on her face. Sure, a battle of wits and courage with the Almighty was a joy, be it in real life or in the game. Both of them were carrying notebooks. The desks in luxurious suites were usually big enough, not to mention that there was a dining table beside the hot spring. There was a bottle of red wine and a very beautiful plate of fruit on the table. In a hotel like this, the food and drinks were all the freshest. Even in the open air, there was not a single speck of dust. The weather outside was nice. The two of them put their laptops on the dining table and sat facing each other. They entered the game page at the same time. Bojo smiled. She clicked on the mouse and selected the character. The 1v1 this time wasn't the same character as the one she had played before, although he was also an assassin. But there were many types of assassins. This time, Bojo chose the magic thorn, which didn't have the invisibility function. She had chosen this option because she knew that the invisibility ability was useless against the Almighty. That was because when she got close, the other party would be able to sense her. That way, she wouldn't be able to hunt him down. Once the invisibility function was broken, it meant that the game character would be half useless. Since that was the case, it was better to choose this one blade style. Chinamo was indeed Chinamo. After seeing her avatar, he didn't reveal any emotions. Instead, he lifted his thin lips into a faint smile. The music started playing. The two of them set off at the same time. Both of them didn't play the game according to the usual rules. Once they were out of the city walls, they disappeared from the game page. Bojo knew that just because she couldn't see them didn't mean they didn't exist. According to the Almighty's style, he would definitely be slaughtering blue and red beasts in the bushes. Killing wild beasts to raise their finances was a must for assassins. Bojo glanced at the small map. She carried her knife and swept across the bushes like a gust of wind. She was fast. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared again. It wasn't just her. Chinamo was the same. This 1v1 could be said to be unprecedented. If it was uploaded online, it would definitely attract a lot of attention. Needless to say, there were actually some spectators. At the start, the youngster had entered by mistake. After all, there were people fighting in the PK arena and Red was floating around. Of course, he had to enter to take a look. The moment he entered, he couldn't move. It wasn't because of anything else but the IDs of the two dueling players. Spade Z and Chinamo. Was this real? That person didn't believe it at first and shared it with his good friend in the game. Take a look, is this real? The moment he shared it, there was an uproar. F asterisk CK. Two professional almighties. Aren't Spade Z and Almighty Chin a couple? Why is it a 1v1? Aha! My two husbands are PK because of me. Who do you think I should marry? Upstairs. Wipe your sweat. Stop fooling around. Give me the PK location. I want to watch too. Just like that, a large group of spectators flooded in. There weren't many players at this point, and only a limited number of people knew about it. Hence, it was a large group of spectators. Compared to the time when Chin Mo and Bojio were playing together, there were far fewer spectators. Wait a minute. Is Almighty Chin really fighting with Spade Z? Why aren't they on the map? Newcomer, I suggest you switch to Almighty Chin or Big Spade. With the guidance, they switched the crowd's view to Chin Mo's. In other words, whatever Chin Mo saw, they would see. Only then did they realize that it wasn't that the two of them didn't exist on the map, but that they were really moving too quickly. Every step they took was filled with bushes, and there wasn't a single pause in between. Everywhere they went, monsters were killed. To reach such a level, they had to have a thorough understanding of the game map. If it were me, I wouldn't even know how to move in the wilderness and would often bump into walls. Bump into walls, cough, cough. I'm sure everyone has experienced it before. There's no need to explain, but Almighty Chin's maneuvering is indeed beautiful. How exactly did he do it? There aren't any traces on the map. It's almost as though he's hidden. Isn't it impossible just because of his fast hand speed? Other than his maneuvering, he has to be able to accurately understand every position on the map. How many times does he have to play hero to be able to do that? It has nothing to do with the number of times. I've been playing for so many years, and I've never managed to come up with such a strategy. Brother, that's Almighty Chin. The words, that's Almighty Chin, seem to answer all their questions. He didn't even waste any time when killing monsters. His moves were used to pass through walls, and when he reached the middle lane, he didn't forget to destroy a wave of troops. Be honest, who do you think will win? It's definitely Almighty Chin. Isn't that obvious? But as soon as he finished his sentence, a line of words appeared on the computer screen. The Tyrant King has been killed by Spade Z. Everyone who played hero knew that killing the Tyrant King would double the player's experience. F asterisk CK. He killed the Tyrant King so early. When it comes to killing monsters in the wilderness, Big Spade is the best. He kills everything he sees. So what if we don't have blue and red beasts? We still have the Tyrant King. Wait a minute, what is Big Spade doing? Hiding in a deserted area? But was there really no one? A person suddenly appeared on the originally deserted map. It was Chin Mo. Everyone knew that the real experts would fight in the wild. Now Spade Z had decided to go against Chin Mo. Was he going to fight? But this time they were wrong again. Spade Z didn't move. Instead, he hid in the bushes as though he had disconnected. What's the meaning of this? What else could it be? He's going after the other big monster, the Tyrant King. Almighty Chin and Big Spade are passionate about killing in the wilderness. Otherwise, why would they wipe out the opponent's wilderness during the competition? If this goes on, will Almighty Chin be caught? From Chin Mo's angle, he couldn't see Spade Z, who was hiding in the bushes. Both of them had the same equipment. In order to kill the big boss, they would use lifesteal and meat equipment so that they wouldn't be killed by the boss. Because when the boss lost HP, the hero would heal. But even so, there was a risk of losing HP while hunting the big boss. According to the current pace, once the Tyrant King and Chin Mo lost HP at the same time, Spade Z would jump out, killing two birds with one stone, killing both the Tyrant King and Chin Mo, even if he couldn't kill two birds with one stone. At that time, Chin Mo would escape to avoid Spade Z's attack, giving up on hunting the Tyrant King. Naturally, the Tyrant King would fall into Spade Z's hands. I thought Spade Z and Almighty Chin would kill each other directly, but it seems like the better the player, the more they don't fight directly. Why? If they fight directly at the start, they won't be able to compete. Indeed, the reason why Hero of Legends was more interesting than other games was that it wasn't just a game where you cut me with your sword and I killed you with my sword. Instead, it required the player to think and set up a strategy. How to move, how to attack, when to advance, and when to retreat were very particular. On the screen, Chinemo only had half HP left, and so did the big monster Tyrant King. Both of them were losing HP. Everyone held their breath, as if they had been waiting for this scene. Simply put, they were waiting for Spade Z to show his blade. Assassins all knew that the strongest move of an assassin was the big move. Whether the big move was used or not, it directly affected whether the person could be killed. It's coming. As soon as this sentence came out, the surrounding players all fell into a state of nervous breathing. They stared at the screen, their eyes lighting up. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because Spade Z, who was hiding in the bushes, had moved. On the other hand, Chinemo didn't have much HP left, and the Tyrant King was on the verge of collapse. This was the best time for all assassins to hunt. Bojo narrowed her eyes, her slender fingers moving abruptly. Her movements seemed to be able to create a shadow. It was because of her fast hand speed that she was able to achieve such an effect. In the past, no matter how good people described Spade Z, they had never experienced it for themselves. But now, as they watched him rush out like a cheetah, they realized that other than Spade Z, no one else could attack with such speed. This time, Almighty Chin was probably going to be caught. But was that really the case? The moment Spade Z rushed over, Chinemo leaped over the wall. It was as though Chinemo had eyes in the back of his head, jumping over the wall. He missed. The surrounding crowd was so excited that they didn't care about the situation, grabbing onto the computer table, their entire bodies glued to the screen. F***CK. How did Almighty Chin do it? I'll give him full marks for that jump. No one would be able to catch him. But the problem is Almighty Chin is too good at calculating. He didn't jump earlier or later, choosing this moment to let Spade Z tank the monster. Wait a minute, it's not over. Indeed, it wasn't over. The moment Bojo entered the boss pit, she knew she had been tricked by the Almighty. With the Almighty's jump, all the aggro on the boss was directed towards her. Less than half of her HP was gone. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was the Almighty's big move, the 3,000 knife cutting. That white slender figure that came and went without a trace flashed back again. A huge silver brilliance instantly filled the screen. It was so beautiful that it was a little ridiculous. If it had been anyone else, they would have died under such an attack. But Bojo was Bojo. Even though she was trapped by the wall, she could still execute her most beautiful move. The weapons clashed, sparks flying. Her movements were unbelievably fast, and with the effect of her move, she managed to avoid the fatal 3,000 knife cutting. The audience couldn't see how Spade Z moved, but it was that dazzling movement that gave off an extremely cool effect. They never knew that this game character could be played so beautifully. It felt as though they had been caught off guard. Nice dodge. Some people couldn't help but exclaim. He can escape. As long as he has HP, with Spade Z's hand speed, it won't be hard to escape. But Chinmo's tactics weren't that simple. He knew that he didn't have any more moves and normal attacks wouldn't be able to deal with Spade Z. Hence, Chinmo turned and attacked the boss, which had regained its full HP, before retreating swiftly. It can't be he's still fighting at a time like this? Just as the audience was about to ask. On the other side, Spade Z, who had jumped out of the wall with low HP, was struck by the boss claws. He couldn't resist anymore, lying in the bushes. The audience was dumbfounded. They couldn't wait to start a video chat. So Almighty Chin's move was intentional, using the boss to kill. F***CK. This is the first time I've seen someone use such a tactic. Besides, Big Spade was the one who wanted to capture Almighty Chin. But why does it feel like he fell into Almighty Chin's trap? It wasn't a trap. Bojo glanced at the hero lying on the ground, her silver hair moving. When she glanced up, there wasn't a hint of disappointment. Instead, when she glanced at Chinemo, her eyes darkened. Chinemo glanced at the youngster in front of him, meeting her gaze, his voice calm. Hero isn't just about hand speed. Bojo's competitive spirit was ignited. Another round. Chinemo didn't agree. Instead, he stuffed a hand into his pocket and stood up nonchalantly. Take off your clothes. Bojo arched a brow in confusion. Chinemo replied, It's time for the hot spring. Besides, you lost. Bojio. Chapter 892. Both of them were drenched from head to toe. Bojio could clearly feel the water dripping down the Almighty's black hair, landing on her collarbone. She wasn't sure if it was because of the high temperature, but it felt as though she was being burned. The panting was still ringing in her ears. It was because of this man's restraint that he was even more alluring. In the end, Chin Mo didn't do anything to her. Instead, he carried her into the bathroom. He turned on the shower, the cold water splashing onto her head. Bojio was instantly jolted awake. Her silver hair was still messy as she sneezed. She glanced at Chin Mo, the corners of her lips lifting as she broke into a devilish smile. It was rare to see the Almighty in such a pathetic state. Chin Mo arched a brow, pulling her back into his embrace. Do you really want me to strip you? No, Brother Mo, the water is cold. Isn't it inappropriate for me to accompany you? Bojio replied, unable to conceal her obvious delight in his misfortune. Once again, Chin Mo doubted his own taste. Other than this guy's face, what else did he like about her? But even so, he still felt that the youngster who was secretly smiling was so cute that he wanted to hug her and rub her. Chin Mo really did that. Why not? We can shower together. Don't worry, it will warm you up and not let you catch a cold. Chin Mo was always a man of his words. His left hand caressed the youngster's back. Bojio shivered, unable to escape. In the end, the two of them stayed in the bathroom for a long time. Anyway, Bojio had become obedient. Her handsome face was burning hot, her red ears trembling. The word F*CK carried a lot of meaning. She couldn't wear her previous clothes anymore. She wrapped a huge towel around her. On the other hand, the Almighty was still in his battle uniform because he had taken off his clothes. His body was upright, exuding an invincible elegance. Most importantly, he looked much more refreshed. Who exactly was the one suppressing who? Before she heard the Almighty say that they were going downstairs for dinner, she had been a little depressed. Then, the Almighty had ordered 30 small lobsters for her and asked if she wanted to eat them. The little gloom and whatnot disappeared like smoke in thin air. After all, the Almighty's little sweetheart was trying to please her, the overbearing CEO. She couldn't make things difficult for him. Eating lobster and drinking Budweiser was a must before the game. All the Supreme Alliance members were present for this meal. Everyone's gaze swept over the silver-haired youth, intentionally or unintentionally. Finally, it was Lin Feng's turn. With a glass of wine and a sentence, he said to the young man, "Brother, I admire you." It was a miracle that someone could survive after using force on the captain. Bojio bit the lobster pincer and clinked her glass with one hand. She glanced at Yin Hu's direction and said meaningfully, "You could do it too." Lin Feng, who understood the meaning, really wanted to curse out loud. This was probably how boys got along. It was impossible not to have alcohol, smoke, or dirty words. These were the men of the North. To express his feelings, he always hammered his shoulders with his fists. But at this moment, Bojio didn't forget to turn and ask the day Shui Yaoyao, "What's wrong?" Shui Yaoyao snapped back to her senses, her eyes bright. "Nothing, I just feel that this is good." Bojio laughed, taking the wine glass from her hands. "Girls shouldn't drink so much." Shui Yaoyao had something to ask. She wasn't sure if she was being too sensitive. She felt that Her Highness Gio was acting differently recently. How should she put it? It seemed as though something had come to an end. Chapter 893. But speaking of which, after the National League, they were about to leave, right? Lin Feng was clearer about this than Shui Yaoyao. Some people weren't heartless or naive, but the people you cared about wanted to see you in this state. That way, he would be more at ease when he left. Lin Feng lifted his hand, downing another glass of wine. A foreign country wasn't that far away. It would only take a day's flight. Wasn't transportation so advanced now? But even such a consolation, it couldn't change the fact his best brother was about to leave. Hence, he couldn't leave any regrets in the National League. Because of the competition tomorrow, they couldn't eat too late. Feng, he had always been a smiling prince. He stood up in his suit, holding the wine glass in his hand. It's the semi-finals of the National League. After this match, we might meet with Xiangnan, our former opponent. They are now the ace of the esports industry. It is said that no one in China can defeat them. This time, it's time for Supreme Alliance to shine. Yin Hu, 1v1, Spade Z, Qin Mo, 2v2. With that, he glanced at Qin Mo, smiling. You and Little Spade can coordinate beforehand. MH, Qin Mo replied faintly. It was obvious that this arrangement was what he had in mind. I wish Supreme Alliance a victory. With that, Feng, he tilted his head back and downed the wine in his glass. The duo he had high hopes for could finally shine in the esports arena. The trump card had to be left for the crucial moment, because they knew that tomorrow's competition wasn't going to be easy. Rao Rong, that man, had supported the entire team. The night sky darkened. At the same time, in the same city, in a different hotel. After doing some research, Rao Rong was about to return to his room when he received a call. It wasn't anyone else. It was the fake Z that the crime squad had been chasing. The girl caressed the cat in her arms, sighing deeply. Rao Rong, it's hard for me to call you so late at night. But I have no choice. There's a change of plans. You have to lose tomorrow's competition. Lose? Rao Rong clenched his empty hand. Do you know what you're saying? Calm down. The girl frowned, not liking his way of expressing his emotions. The bet for this match is huge, and many people have invested. Everyone has high hopes for your team. If you lose, our partner will earn quite a bit. Rao Rong, you don't have to react so strongly. You know better than me that things aren't as simple as they seem on the surface. There are benefits involved in esports as well. Isn't the reason why your previous club chased you away proof? Rao Rong tilted his head, his gaze sinking. I can't agree to this request. This is esports. Rao Rong. The girl rubbed her forehead as if she felt that this person was extremely stubborn and troublesome. Now that things have come to this, you should understand that whether or not your father's case will be overturned depends on whether or not you can satisfy your partner. You are already an adult, so I don't have to explain too much. Losing the competition is good for you. Rao Rong's eyes reddened. Are you threatening me? Just treat it as a threat. The girl glanced over at the platform she was paying attention to, her gaze venomous. Do whatever you want. It's just a suggestion. Before you make a decision, think about why you came back. Don't mix things up. That way, your father's case can be reopened and I can help you gather more information. Or do you think you can avenge your father without us? Rao Rong, aren't you awake yet? The higher-ups don't have the time to bother with your father. So what if he was once a hero? It doesn't matter. It won't be easy to overturn the case. Every sentence was forcing Rao Rong to make a decision. Why did he come back? That year, his family broke up and he was chased out of the entertainment department. At his wit's end, he made a deal with the devil. He had a premonition, but his desire for revenge was too strong. He wanted to overturn his father's case, to return all the humiliation he had suffered. Once he got to know the devil, he would fall into the abyss. In the dead of night, Rao Rong kept asking himself this question. The answer was inexplicable. In such a world, the shameless always had a better life than the shameless, because they never felt guilty. When the pain was at its peak, Rao Rong would always smoke, and this time was no exception. He locked himself in the bathroom, lit a cigarette, and leaned his head against the wall. He raised one hand and heavily punched the wall. He had to lose. It was his blood. He couldn't take revenge. He couldn't accept it. No one could understand how he had lived the past 2 years. The moment he closed his eyes, he would remember his father's face. His body slid down the wall, his bloodshot eyes gradually returning to a calm state. There were many ways to kill a person. To destroy his will. Rao Rong lowered his lids. When his black hair fell down, he typed 3 words. I will lose. He couldn't even type another word. In the end, he had let down his father's wishes to be an upright person and play an exciting esports game. He couldn't do it anymore. Dreams weren't something that could be achieved with hard work. In the face of dirty reality, one could only lower their head. Rao Rong stood up, his back slightly damp as he walked into the night. He assumed it would be pitch black when he entered. But when he opened the door, he was surprised to find the desktop on. Someone was sprawled on the table, rubbing his eyes when he entered. He cursed, F***CK, Zhao Sampang, you shameless bastard, you promised to train me so that I can face Supreme Alliance in a better state tomorrow. How dare you attack me when I'm asleep? You're asleep. If I don't attack you, who else would I attack? Besides, how many times have I told you to call me handsome? The earpiece was loud, and the person's voice wasn't soft. The quarrel made Rao Rong pause. Lin Shintao turned his chair around, looking at him. Captain, where did you go? I've been waiting for you. Rao Rong reached out, tugging his collar. In the darkness, his expression couldn't be seen. Just taking a walk. You couldn't sleep either, right? Lin Chuntao glanced up at the ceiling before shifting his gaze back. We're going up against Supreme Alliance tomorrow, and I can't even keep my hands to myself. Captain, will we win? Rao Rong tightened his grip at the last sentence. In that moment, he didn't dare to meet the annoying person's eyes. Lin Shintao promised once again, I won't drag you down. Without any warning, when he turned his head, he saw that face. Rao Rong tilted his head, his voice shrouded in the night. It's late, sleep early. We'll talk about the competition tomorrow. Hearing this, Lin Shintao was a little disappointed, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that the captain was right. I'm going to play one more round to consolidate my skills. Rao Rong didn't stop him. He didn't chase the annoying fellow out like before. At least for today. He wanted him to be alone with him. The familiar game sounds. The page of Hero entered. It was a game he had loved ever since he was a student. His father used to play with him, listening to the sounds. Rao Rong shut his eyes slowly. At the Hot Spring Hotel, the Supreme Alliance members weren't asleep yet. While the Almighty was on the phone, he left the youngster behind with a sly smile. You don't have to worry. As the director of the Qin Group and your manager, I can handle such matters. You have to be careful. Don't let the media catch you. You're still a boy. Even if you're staying together, you have to be careful. Before you entered, we were playing. Boju leaned back, her arms slouching lazily. What you saw was just the wager after the 1v1. The corner of Feng Yi's mouth twitched in disbelief. 1v1? You and young Master Qin? Tomorrow's competition will make me realize my problem. The fastest way is to win against me. Boju stood up, stuffing a hand in her pocket as she sighed. But the wager is a little shameless. Feng Yi stilled. This was the first time he had seen someone who could understand that person's intentions so quickly and analyze it so clearly. What did you learn? Feng Yi chuckled. The youngster glanced over, the moonlight shining through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her silver hair accentuated her handsome face. Hero isn't won by just having fast hands, it's just the basics. When you meet an expert who truly understands Hero, it's useless no matter how fast your hands are. In order to win, experience, strategy, and teamwork are required. Hero has never been a one-man game. Feng Yi stilled again. When had it been? That person had said it before. Hero had never been a one-man game. The current Spade Z made him feel at ease. If he were to fight against Rao Rong, regardless of how fast his hands were, he would still lose. Tomorrow's competition was destined to be a battle of skills. If he hadn't understood this point, he would have been worried little Spade would lose. But from the looks of it, that person was more thorough than he had thought. In a 1v1 match, Ning Yin had easily solved all the problems he was facing. Feng Yi stood where he was, watching the youngster's back view as he left. He was still waiting for Qin. Mo little Spade side was fine. But he knew the condition of young Master Qin's hand better than anyone else. The attending doctor in America had told him. Young Master Qin hadn't fully recovered, only 70%. He might have been able to survive the previous competition because of little Spade Z. He didn't have to use the true 3,000 knife cutting. Chapter 894. If the 3,000 knife cutting couldn't be used, Supreme Alliance might stop here. However, the reason why the 3,000 knife cutting could be formed was because of the user's extremely fast hand speed and accurate positioning. In order to achieve the effect of killing someone without leaving a trace, the flexibility of the wrist was extremely high. How to quickly move the mouse, how to operate the up, down, left, and right keys on the keyboard, where to place the left hand, how to coordinate the position of the right hand, and how to coordinate the position of the wrist would definitely cause a lot of pressure on the wrist muscles. Hence, Feng Yi wanted to know what young Master Qin was thinking. Regardless of whether he was a businessman or the director of the entertainment department, he wanted Supreme Alliance to win. But compared to winning, every member was more important, regardless of whether that person was young Master Qin or not. When Qin Mo saw Feng Yi, he knew why he was here. Don't tell anyone about my hand injury. Qin Mo's voice was calm. It won't affect tomorrow's competition. Feng Yi didn't speak at first, but after a second, he lit a cigarette. Then Little Spade will coordinate with you tomorrow. Feng Yi, there's something you're wrong about, Qin Mo interrupted. In the future, Little Spade will be the main player, and I'll coordinate. Feng Yi stilled. His eyes seemed to have been heavily shaken. When he first saw Spade Z, he thought that there was finally someone who could keep up with young Master Qin's speed. If this youngster joined, young Master Qin's 3,000 knife cutting would definitely return to its peak. But Feng Yi never expected young Master Qin to coordinate with him and let Little Spade be the main player from the start. Was he going to give up the leading position of the entire competition? How much trust did he have in him? Was that why? If Little Spade knew how confident you are in her, she would definitely be delighted. Feng Yi couldn't help but laugh. Little Spade doesn't seem to know the meaning of humility. That's why you don't have to tell her. Chiamo stuffed a hand into his pocket, his deep gaze looking out at the night sky. Let's see how much she has grown in tomorrow's competition. Feng Yi understood what Qin Mo meant. If they couldn't even take down Rao Rome, then Supreme Alliance wouldn't have a chance of winning against Xiangnan. The night fell slowly. In the end, it was so thick that it was dyed red by the white of the east. National semifinals. The media would always arrive earlier than the contestants. All the esports platforms had already stopped all the individual esports shows and emptied all the resources just for this live broadcast. At the same time, Hero became a game for everyone. Esports was also constantly developing. From not being forgiven in the beginning, it had now officially become a profession. Hot blood sprouted from youth. Anyone who had played the game would know. Sometimes we can't let go of the game, not because of the game itself, but because of the people we meet in the game. Those who move us, accompany us to vent our emotions, and shout out the existence of the world that we yearn for the most. In the biggest square in the city center of H, a 20 square meter big screen was showing the game Hero. Everyone was looking up, even those who haven't played the game before. They would also talk about it. That was why some people would say that 2017 was the era of esports all-stars. In the hall of 10,000 people, the lights were dazzling. The big screen slowly descended. Every one of them would present the most exciting moment of the game. Even the commentator was a big shot. The director had already picked up the communication device in his hand and brought it to his lips. Everyone get ready. Action. Even though it was a live broadcast, there were people controlling the scene. The moment the director finished speaking, all the lights were turned on, shining on a woman in a pure white dress. She could be called the most beautiful MC in the esports industry. Handsome men and beautiful women, we meet again in the annual National League. A year has passed, but I haven't let go of Hero. What about you guys? The female MC's voice was loud and clear. The atmosphere in the hall was stirred up instantly. The female MC smiled. I heard that this year's competition is more exciting than the previous years. There are many reasons. Let me start with one, the #1 newcomer in Hero, the FC King of Zone C. This was the introduction of the order of appearance. It was different from all the previous competitions. The moment the female MC finished speaking, the big screen immediately showed the scenes of a youngster playing the game. The way he moved the mouse, the way he smiled when his hands were fast, the way he was in a variety show, wearing a pure black uniform on his shoulders, the clothes fluttering in the wind, his eyes looking toward the camera, the handsome and arrogant self-introduction, just 5 words. I am Spadesy. When Bojio came out, almost all the other screens were recording the scenes of the youngster killing enemies in the game, from the first appearance of this ID in the game to the National League. Coming and going without a trace. One FC kill after another, as the number accumulated converged into one word: KO. When they saw this scene, some fans even reached out to cover their mouths, their hearts beating along with the special effects of the game. That extremely short scene pulled them back into their memories. The first time they heard the name Spadesy, that person was still farming FC kills in the wilderness area. Now, he stood in the esports arena. His eyes were clear, his body tall and slender. He became a star that everyone paid attention to. Among them, the ones who felt the most were the Spade fans who stood behind the youngster from the beginning. They finally reached this step. In a month's time, it seemed like they had experienced too much. The scene of the youngster being splashed with coke was still vivid in their minds. The figure that stood in front of the computer after losing the game and lowered his head for the first time was still there. All of these difficulties were fixed in the final scene. The youngster's messy silver hair walked out from the entrance. His handsome and devilish side profile was the same as before. Every single one of them made their entrance in the same way. Even Shui Yao Yao, from a most ordinary to the most extraordinary. Now, Shui Yao Yao could finally look back unwaveringly after seeing those gazes. It was because she was wearing the uniform. All the team members were gathered. They lined up handsomely, exuding the aura of a king. Similarly, the opponent wasn't weak either. It was because of this level of strength that people were looking forward to seeing on the big screen. However, there were still places that the camera couldn't capture. For example, in the resting area before the start of the competition. It wasn't known if it was intentional, but when Li Nuo tilted his head to take something, he bumped into Rao Rong's shoulder. There was a hint of disdain in his gaze. "Captain, you aren't young anymore. The next time you stand in the formation, find your position. Don't always try to stick your head out." Rao Rong didn't reply, his gaze darkening. What Li Nuo hated the most was this person's gaze. He was just a poor man who had been chased away, but he really thought he was someone important. "I'm thirsty too. Buy me a bottle of water. You don't have to watch over the 1v1. I know how to fight." Li Nuo's words were so harsh that the club manager was put in a difficult position. Asking an esports captain to buy water, but for the sake of the investment, the manager spoke up. "Rao Rong, go ahead. We'll take care of the competition." Rao Rong lifted his lids, looking at the manager. That kind of gaze really made people uncomfortable, especially the manager, who understood everything in his heart. But so what? In the end, money was still the most important. The manager coughed pretentiously. "This is the National League. Rao Rong, don't throw a tantrum." While he was saying these words, he didn't notice Rao Rong's clenched and relaxed fists. In the end, he seemed to have given up on something. His eyes turned deathly still. "All right." It was Rao Rong's voice. It was a voice Lin Chuntao had never heard before. His voice was hoarse and damp. The Rao Rong he knew. The Almighty who moved his mouse in high spirits. Why had he ever been forced to such a state? Bang! The bottle of mineral water fell onto the ground. Lin Chuntao bolted up from his chair, tugging Li Nuo's collar. "Don't you have hands? You don't even know how to grab water, young Master Li." Such a commotion naturally attracted the attention of everyone. Even the media started to pay attention to them. The club manager had to calm things down, lowering his voice. "Chuntao, it's a competition. What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Lin Chuntao scoffed. "Why don't you think about what you have done?" The manager narrowed his eyes when he wasn't listening. "What you're doing is putting the company in a difficult position. Are you still going to compete?" Lin Chuntao knew it was a threat. He clenched his fists, lowering them. In the end, Rao Rong held onto his wrists. He understood what his captain meant. But once he was forced to bear with it, he had to sacrifice his pride. He didn't have to bear with it. Wasn't esports all about winning? If power was involved, could it still be called esports? Lin Chuntao released his grip. Just as the manager and Li Nuo were about to reveal a smug expression, Lin Chuntao spoke up again. "Then let's not compete. I'm withdrawing from the team. Without a captain to direct us, there's no point in competing. I'm withdrawing too." One of the players stood up, his expression calm. "I joined the club because Captain Rao is here. I'm withdrawing too." The third, fourth, and fifth, apart from Li Nuo, the entire team felt the glint in their eyes. It made the club manager's heart skip a beat. Where is this? It was the National League semifinals. Countless eyes were on them. Besides, hadn't they invested so much for this competition? They didn't want to compete just like that. They were making the club a scapegoat. If all of their team members quit during the National League semifinals, the impact would be enough to destroy all of their business. The club manager had never expected Lin Chentao to be so daring. It wasn't just Lin Chentao. It was the same for the usually quiet team members. What exactly were they up to? How did the manager know? Rome wasn't built in a single day. This wasn't a young team. They had also walked through that difficult era until now. They watched as they destroyed the thing they cared about the most. They persuaded themselves to bear with it because of the competition and because they cared too much about their position. If Lin Chentao hadn't been the first to speak, they wouldn't have stood up. But human hearts were made of flesh. All they hoped for was a fair competition. It was easy for a single person to speak up. However, the voices of a group of people could blossom into flowers. In this world, one couldn't be arrogant after doing something wrong and hurting others. This was the esports arena, the place they loved the most. If this place wasn't clean anymore, just as Lin Chentao had said, there was no point in competing. Every single one of them stood behind Rao Rong. Some of their actions were spontaneous. It wasn't possible for Supreme Alliance to not notice their actions. Bojiu arched a brow. Feng Shang didn't understand, stammering, "Oh, idol, are they doing?" "Nothing." Bojiu turned and patted Feng Shang's head. "We met a team that deserves a good fight." Feng Shang still didn't understand, but it didn't affect his excitement. It had been a long time since he was patted on the head by his idol. What should he do? Coco bit the rabbit's ear. He couldn't help rolling his eyes. He had never seen someone who blushed so easily. He didn't seem like Manager Feng's brother at all. But this time, the opposing team was about to change. They had indeed changed. It wasn't just these people. There was Rao Rong, a heart that had already died. Unknowingly, it started beating again. It was probably because of the figures standing behind him. Or perhaps it was because he was reminded of the days he had fought alongside them. Or perhaps it was because his father had told him to go and fight an intense esports match. Rao Rong glanced up, the phone in his pocket ringing. At this moment, it was obvious who it was. He didn't pick it up, allowing the ringing to continue until it stopped. The club manager gave in. He had no choice but to give in. He had to coax them into competing. Fine, as long as you're happy. Everyone, I was wrong, okay? This is a competition, not a game. Don't just casually say that you want to leave the team. How can you do that, right? The manager saw that the situation was not easy to clean up, so he tried to keep the peace. Rao Rong glanced over, speaking for the first time since he entered. "Manager, you should know this is a competition, not a game. Chentao, go over and tell the committee that we want to change our 1v1 player and use the substitution opportunity." With that, Lin Chentao's eyes lit up. Li Nuo started scolding. "Rao Rong, you F***er, are you trying to take advantage of me? Do you know the consequences of not letting me have a 1v1? Regardless of the consequences." Rao Rong glanced at Li Nuo. "With your standard, you won't be able to win Supreme Alliance." Li Nuo gritted his teeth. "You." The manager was furious. "Rao Rong, what right do you have to make such a decision? I'm the captain of this team. Of course I have the right." Rao Rong's words stopped the manager's rage. The committee had already nodded in approval. Shortly after, the name list appeared on screen. The atmosphere was stirring. Chapter 895. The real competition was about to begin. That was the thought in everyone's mind. The scene started. In Wu Yao was still smoking, dressed in his black uniform. He took over Yin Hu's place and walked towards the 1v1 seats. The special effects started playing. The two players put on their headphones at the same time. The competition had officially begun. Everyone knew that this was a PK between the two players. The more skilled they were, the longer the battle would take. At this point, no one would say that In Wu Yao was old and unsuitable for esports. The shoutcasters weren't as confident as when Supreme Alliance had just entered the scene. At this point, everyone finally admitted that Supreme Alliance wasn't weak. But that didn't mean that they would win, because their opponents weren't simple. The first blood was taken by Lynch and Tao's team. But very quickly, Yin Wu Yao returned the favor. Every time the two players clashed, the audience couldn't help but take in a deep breath. This was a battle where either one of them would die. They were both considered to be older people in the esports arena. But their drive didn't diminish at all. If it was a newbie, he would have been killed by the uncle. Lin Feng loved to speak the truth. Now, it's time to see who has the more murderous spirit. The two shoutcasters agreed with Lin Feng. Veteran players have their advantages. They have more experience and are familiar with the map. But the downside is that they think too much. After dying once, no one will easily give up a second drop of HP. That's why both Yin Wu Yao and the opposing team are holding back. It seems like whoever breaks through their limits has a higher chance of winning. That's right. However, a 1v1 is usually not a good match. No one is willing to go all out. After all, if they fail at the start, it will affect the rest of the battle. That's right. Even I was most afraid of being drawn into a 1v1. I can't be reckless. I have to. It's here. The commentator suddenly interrupted his partner's words. He glanced over. Everyone's gaze was on the screen. The shoutcaster's eyes lit up. Snipe in the middle lane? Does Yin Wu Yao want to start a fight in the middle lane? As soon as he finished speaking, the two figures clashed again. That kind of fast and beautiful operation presented a smooth scene that was addicting to the eyes. This was the kind of sparks that would only appear between two experts. If you think the heroes just stand there and attack, you are wrong. These two figures were entangled with each other, unleashing all their skills. How could they quickly avoid each other's attacks and then turn around to attack? During this period of time, the two figures didn't even stop, let alone stand. Every time one thought that one of them was about to die, that person's figure would sway, dodge the attack, and then turn around to attack. Both of them were at low HP, so both of them were wary of each other. They were afraid that they would be killed if they were careless. After all, no one wanted to lose a second life. With 3 lives lost, the competition would be over. Who wouldn't want to win? Hence, at this moment, the two of them simultaneously retreated back to the city to heal. The experienced commentator spoke again. If this stalemate isn't broken, the competition will drag on indefinitely. At this point, it all depends on who has more perseverance. That was indeed the case. The audience had never seen such a competition before. Too much time was wasted. 10 minutes followed by another 10 minutes. The 1v1 actually went on for almost an hour, but there wasn't a single sign of change. Another half an hour passed. Both Yin Wu Yao and the opposing player held onto the mouse for more than a certain amount of time. Everyone knew that this couldn't go on. The club manager watched the scene. He was already unhappy with the sudden change of players. So when he saw the situation, he reached out his hand and used the one and only authority in the competition. As the supervising coach, he had the authority. But at this point in time, he shouldn't be interrupting the competition. The manager didn't think too much. He was only thinking about how to win. Hence, he didn't even care about Rao Rong's warning gaze. He picked up the microphone and hollered at the competing player, "Watch out, don't get killed again. If you can't win this competition, you will leave with your captain Rao." When Rao Rong pulled the manager's microphone over, he was already done. When a player heard him, he tightened his grip on the mouse, his gaze lowered. It was probably this kind of language that had provoked him. The audience could see that the character in the game was moving faster. At this moment, Supreme Alliance made a call. But this time, the person who gave Yin Wu Yao advice wasn't Shinamo, but Bo Jio. As the vice-captain of Supreme Alliance, Bo Jio had a head of messy silver hair. Her thin lips lifted slightly as she said to Yin Wu Yao, "Uncle, you don't have to think so much. There is no construction without destruction in esports." Hearing this, Yin Wu Yao's fingers paused, and he turned around abruptly. When a youngster had found him, her first sentence had been, "Why are you still playing games if you don't shake up the esports world?" Back then, he had come back because of this fearlessness. He had charged forward, not for fame, not for profit, and not even for victory, but to fight an exciting esports battle. even if no one would remember his name after he lost. He couldn't retreat out of fear of losing. In Wuyao laughed. Previously, he had been sitting in front of the computer in fear of being affected, putting down his cigarette. But now, he held it between his thin lips, moving the mouse as he moved forward. That kind of attitude was the most carefree north of Ean Mountain. He thought that from that moment on, he knew very well why he had returned. It was because of the youngster's charisma. That youngster would never be inflexible. He wasn't young, but had an astounding spirit. Even until today, the little captain he knew was still the little captain he had been in the past. He wasn't afraid of anything. He was still handsome. Without destruction, there was no construction. Little captain was right. Yin Wuyao's fingertips were typing furiously. The shoutcaster couldn't help but freeze when Yin Wuyao came face to face with his opponent once again. At this moment, with the previous performances, it wasn't expected to be so soon. But this time, it wasn't just a face-to-face, it was a direct confrontation. Whose positioning, whose attack was stronger, whose speed of retreat was faster would determine the outcome of this match. It was another battle between two experts. When both players' health was low, they had to retreat. Just as everyone was calculating who would be the fastest to return to the city, they saw Yin Wuyao turn to the side. Instead of retreating, he dashed towards his opponent. This action was unintentionally courting death. But was it really courting death? That was the greatest joy of Hero. No matter what, one shouldn't expect the outcome. It wasn't just about positioning and hand speed. One had to know how to make use of the terrain. If one had all the conditions, then the most exciting thing was to kill with low HP. The audience watched as north of the Ean Mountains swept past the side and hid in the bushes. He skillfully avoided his opponent's big move before going for another kill. KO. In an instant, the entire stadium erupted in cheers. The support batons were banged loudly. Second life. As long as he took down the opponent's third life, then the victory would belong to Supreme Alliance. No one understood why Yin Wuyao's playing style was so different from before, but it was because of the bravery that could be described as flowing water. Soon, the opponent's last defense tower was reached. Yin Wuyao took down the opponent's capital city. Game over. Supreme Alliance won. The cheers grew even louder. Even the shoutcaster hadn't expected the second half of the match to end so quickly. When he regained his senses, his first reaction was to ask the director to replay the match. "Congratulations to Supreme Alliance," the shoutcaster said sincerely, his voice filled with disbelief. Lin Shintao couldn't understand why Yin Wuyao's playing style had changed so suddenly. He was no longer carefree, as though he wasn't afraid of winning or losing. How did this happen? It would be a lie if he said he wasn't disappointed. But Rao Rong knew he couldn't let the results affect him. His voice was calm. The live conversation just now. The live conversation just now? Lin Shintao glanced over at Supreme Alliance, his eyes widening. "Captain, do you mean that north of the Ean Mountain changed so drastically because of what Spadesy said to him?" Rao Rong remained silent, clearly a stranger. Lin Shintao grabbed his hair. F***CK. What exactly did Spadesy say to north of the Ean Mountain? Why is he so stubborn? Bojo didn't say much, just 4 words. Without destruction, there would be no construction. It was very suitable for Yin Wuyao at this stage. And why did Yin Wuyao dare to charge forward? It was because he knew even if he lost, his team members would also win it back. Because in a 2v2, the two people who were about to go on stage were the ones who could give people a sense of support. On the other hand, Lin Shintao's team wasn't in a good mood. Li Nuo seized the opportunity, the disdain in his eyes obvious. "You bragged so well just now, saying I wasn't suitable for a 1v1. In the end, you still lost. Just you wait. I will definitely tell my father about today's incident and say that you guys suppressed me. Up to you." At this moment, Lin Chuntao didn't want to waste any more time with him, his face cold. "After today, I won't be staying in this team anymore. The same goes for the others. Hence, you better behave. We don't have time for you." Lin Chuntao was asking himself the same question in his mind. How strong was that youngster? They only knew that Spadesy was good at assassins and was adept at getting the first kill. But they never knew. Other than that, there were others. A call was enough to wake north of the Een Mountain up. Really, Lin Chintao couldn't describe it. He walked over and patted the shoulder of the player who had just finished the match. That player had been hanging his head ever since he left the arena, and this time was no exception. However, the strands of hair in front of his forehead fell down. That person's fingers moved, and the expression on his face couldn't be seen clearly. After playing in the pro league for so long, some things have probably been implanted into my bones. For example, I'm very afraid of losing. Because of this fear, I don't even dare to do the bare minimum. I'm the one who didn't have enough courage. Rao Rong sat beside him. You played well, even though you lost. With that, the player's back trembled. Yes, no one could deny that it had been an exciting match. The time record had exceeded any other match since the start of the competition. If they weren't equally skilled, such a number wouldn't have been recorded. The applause from the crowd wasn't just for Yin Wuyao, but for the player as well. Regardless of the team's atmosphere, the competition would still continue. The shoutcaster started to grab everyone's attention. What an exciting 1v1. Next up is the 2v2. Let's take a look at the players from both teams. Even though the list of participants had already been prepared, who would be competing in what, whether it would be a team battle or something like that, would only be announced before the match started. Even the commentator's name had to be displayed on the big screen. All right, let's take a look. The players are Lin Chuntao and Rao Rong. The shoutcaster's eyes widened when he saw the two names. Even he hadn't expected the two of them to be in the 2v2. Are they up to something? F***CK. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Almighty Lin and Almighty Rao are out now, and they're even playing doubles. I want to know who Supreme Alliance is sending. It should be the Fengyan duo, right? After all, they have high chemistry. Even though Shui Yao Yao and Feng Shang have good teamwork, they are nothing compared to Almighty Rao. I think it should be the Fengyan duo too. After all, there are only 4 Supreme Alliance members who have played doubles before. The other 2 are newbies, so it isn't suitable today. The 2 names had appeared at an inappropriate time. The beautiful MC was shocked. She started to press the button on the screen on the left. After seeing the roster, I think everyone is most concerned about the same thing as me. Which 2 names are from Supreme Alliance? Let's take a look at the screen. The moment the MC finished her sentence, on the huge screen, hanging in the air, 2 names froze with a swoosh. Spade Z, Qin Mo. Just 6 words, written in regular script. It was extremely domineering. All of a sudden, screams filled the air, almost lifting the roof of the entire venue. Spade Z and Qin Mo. Am I seeing things? They are actually on the doubles roster. Almighty Qin and Big Spade have never played doubles before. It's either a 1v1 or a team battle. Doubles? Gosh, I don't know why, but I'm looking forward to it. I feel like this is going to be a sweet competition. My heart aches for Almighty Lin for 3 seconds. F***CK. This is the first time my Almighty Qin is playing doubles for the first time. In my life, I have never played doubles with anyone. This is my principle. Some people especially wanted to tell this girl that many of Almighty Qin's principles were no longer absolute after meeting Big Spade. This made Almighty Qin's entire being come alive. Doubles. What did that mean? Chapter 896. The shoutcasters were stirred up by the atmosphere in the stadium, and their voices carried an unavoidable excitement. Looks like both teams are going all out. A double for aces. I thought they would only appear in the team battle, but from the looks of it, no one would have expected Qin Mo's move. The other shoutcaster was equally shocked. From a certain perspective, this is probably the first time Qin Mo has participated in a doubles match. In the past, he has participated in doubles matches with others watching, while he killed 2 players alone. Yeah, Qin Mo is too arrogant, but no one can match his arrogance. How gentle do you think Spade Z's playing style is? I've seen the airport. Seriously, they really like to kill. These 2 are playing doubles. 2 aspects. I'll talk about the good side first. Both of them are first clear kings. Their hand speed and positioning are impeccable. Also, both of them are so domineering. It's not necessarily a good thing to put them in a duo. Between the two of them, one of them has to hold back a little. Rao Rong and Lin Chintao are in the same situation. It's not the same. Lin Chintao's style isn't like Spade Z's. He knows how to work together. Hence, we'll have to see which characters are chosen. Usually, in a doubles match, it's best if the characters can work together. This shouldn't be a problem for Supreme Alliance. After all, Qin Mo and Spade Z are all-rounders. I'm just worried that they won't play according to the rules. Their play style, the commentator had not finished his sentence. The two of them were already seated in front of the computer. They clicked the mouse at the same time and entered the game, choosing the character they wanted to control. The character's stats appeared. The commentator immediately swallowed his words. Do I still play or not? I've already guessed correctly. Even if I don't play by the rules, I can't be this unconventional. Two assassins. How could they cooperate? Damn, am I seeing things? Almighty Qin must be joking, right? Almighty Qin, you really won't consider changing to someone else? Can't Big Spade play with characters with other attributes? It's so tough, go all out. That's not it. Big Spade switched to an assassin this time. With a lifesteal, his HP wouldn't be so low. But Big Spade's forte is camouflage and invisibility. No matter what, it doesn't seem right for two assassins to fight like this. I can't understand this combination anymore. Big Rao's team has a good combination. The assassin has tanky equipment, and there's also a Titan. They have crowd control and damage output. Most importantly, if they don't have any squishy skin, the assassin won't be able to cut through them even if he wants to. It was a game that high-level players could understand. Rao Rong and Lin Chintao are the nemesis of Spade Z and Qin Mo, especially Spade Z. Everyone knows that Spade Z's fast hand speed is a specialty, but when it comes to magical flesh, no matter how fast he is, he still has to consider if he can rush over. This is really a match where no one can predict the outcome. The other shoutcaster was puzzled. Why don't Spade Z play a Fatten as well? In the end, his playstyle is too domineering. Or maybe he came from the wilderness area and likes this kind of rhythm. The shoutcaster shook his head. Spade Z probably isn't used to the change to a professional player. Usually, in such a situation, there would definitely be someone in the team who would switch to a more suitable combination. But regardless of the voices around them, Chapter 897. Similarly, Qin Mo didn't move either. It was no wonder Feng Yi had said they looked alike. All of them were sitting there steadily, without any intention of changing their positions. Any one of them would be able to kill anyone with their looks alone. But their skills were excellent, especially with a lollipop in his mouth. He looked like a handsome hooligan ready for a gang fight. When Lin Chintao saw such an opponent, he really wanted to pull little Spade over and shake her. The four of them had all participated in the same variety show, so they could be considered old acquaintances to a certain extent. Moreover, the Alliance's WeChat group would chat occasionally. From a certain perspective, they were both friends and foes. But when the four of them faced each other, it had always been an unpredictable match. Qin Mo and Spade Z were playing a double. Everyone craned their necks to watch. They were afraid they would miss something exciting. Swoosh! As the game's music blared, the characters that the four of them were controlling appeared on the big screen at the same time. The game had officially begun. All of the fans tightened their grip on the support sticks in their hands, raised their eyes at the same time, and looked in the same direction. In that moment, the crowd was silent, their attention unprecedented. No one knew what kind of visual feast they would be witnessing. Both teams were too strong. The fans were silent, but Lin Chintao couldn't take it anymore. The moment he entered the game, he turned on the public speaker. Little Spade, what's the meaning of both of you playing assassins? And don't you have a toothache from eating lollipops? More importantly, I'm warning you, don't come to our side to fight. If you want to fight, fight your own team. Tell me, do you dare to fight me head-on? As he spoke, Lin Chintao's hands didn't slow down at all. The fans shrugged. He's at again. This was Lin Chintao's style. He would start with nonsense and end with a taunt. But everyone assumed Big Spade wouldn't bother with him. After all, Everyone knew how chatty Lin Chintao was. If you bothered with him, he would definitely ramble on from the start to the end. Unexpectedly, the youngster turned on the public speaker, her lazy voice drifting out. Who wants to fight you head-on, Brother Mo, and I will take the path of a bookworm. You? A top student? Lin Chintao felt that everyone in the world could become a top student. A certain someone looked like a slacker and didn't seem like one. What's wrong with me being a top student? She moved the mouse slightly, her left hand switching between light clicks. The clicking sounds were so fast that it was unbelievable. She still had the time to deal with her opponent's nonsense. As long as it was a battle between experts, they wouldn't take the normal route. However, the shoutcasters could not understand this time. Bojo had always been a player that farmed beasts. Why was she heading straight for the middle lane this time? The speed at which she wiped out the troops was shocking. Rao Rong narrowed his eyes. As a Fatten, he definitely wouldn't allow Spade Z to enter the tower. He wanted to fight him, but his opponent had no intention of fighting him. He turned around and jumped into the jungle. Rao Rong wouldn't follow them easily. It was simple. Qin and Mo might be in the jungle on that side. One of the assassins appeared and lured the sorcerer into the wilderness, while the other assassin appeared to block the sorcerer with his ultimate skill. This is not unheard of. The calmer it was in the game, the more it meant that something was up. From the audience's point of view, they had a panoramic view of the entire map. Hence, they were clear of everyone's location, including the attack signal that Qin and Mo had sent out at the red bushes. Some shook their heads. Supreme Alliance's move is useless against Almighty Rao. I think Spade Z should change his strategy since he is facing Almighty Rao. He wouldn't fall for such a trick. That's true. In terms of experience, Almighty Rao isn't any lesser than Spade Z. There isn't much hope in tricking Almighty Rao. Just as they were discussing, the shoutcaster suddenly spoke up. The shoutcaster suddenly said, I don't think he's trying to attract people. He isn't luring anyone. Another commentator pointed to the red dot on the map. Look at Qin Mo's position. This is obviously a setup, but Rao Rong saw through it. The shoutcaster took a look at the replay. That's not right. If Spade Z was trying to lure someone, he would have stopped for a while to make it easier for them to catch up. That way, the two of them would be able to surround each other and not give each other a chance to escape. But Spade Z didn't stop at all. Judging from his speed, Spade Z shouldn't be trying to lure someone. Otherwise, why wouldn't Spade Z stop and head straight for Qin and Mo? The other shoutcaster immediately switched to the screen, his eyes widening. He isn't luring anyone. He's going for the red beasts. What do you mean? This time, the audience was confused. The shoutcaster immediately organized his thoughts. Let's take a look at Qin Mo's positioning. He first went for the blue beasts and then retreated to get the red beasts. The red beasts were clearly taken down by Qin and Mo a second ago. But what is everyone looking at? Qin and Mo sent out a signal, but he didn't move. Hence, his attack isn't to encircle anyone, but for Spade Z to collect the red beasts. The audience wouldn't have expected such a ploy. What made them speechless was, it wasn't just the red beasts. Even the other beasts in the wilderness were killed in one hit by Spade Z after Qin and Mo was almost done leading the troops. The CP fans couldn't help but cover their faces with their hands. You can't be so doting, letting his wife kill all the beasts. It's so cute. Even though the CP fans' metaphor wasn't very appropriate, it was indeed the case. The two shoutcasters were a little confused. They didn't know how to explain the current situation. Does Qin and Mo mean that Spade Z is the leader of this match and he's the support? Otherwise, how could he fight like this? In that instant, the eyes of those who understood what was going on would tremble. That included Yin Wuyao. He had been holding a cigarette in his mouth, but when he saw this, the ash fell to the ground. At that moment, he sincerely admired the person who had won the Best Esports Player Award at such a young age, because no captain would be willing to be someone's support. Moreover, he wasn't just anyone. He was the strongest hero, Qin and Mo. Or, in his mind, Spade Z was already on par with him. Isn't this too risky? The shoutcaster understood Qin Mo's intentions. But even if Spade Z was the new player king, they had Rao Rong and Lin Chintao on their side. After all, no matter how good Spade Z was, he was still a newbie. Besides, had Qin Mo forgotten? They were playing as an assassin. Right at this moment, the youngster moved again. Her movements were swift, especially her fingers, which were twice as fast as before. F***, what kind of hand speed is that? He's leaping from the bushes in the wilderness. So impressive. Is he going to snatch their beasts again? Isn't that a little unrealistic? Lin Chintao wouldn't allow Spade Z to act recklessly. Indeed, he wouldn't, because Lin Chintao was already waiting at his red beasts, waiting to catch him. But Spade Z didn't go. Instead, he ran into the middle of the two defense towers, took out a wave of troops, and headed straight back. If one had to describe Spade Z's current playstyle, she would go wherever there was money. He was so arrogant that he went to the middle of the two defense towers to cut down the troops. Lin Chintao gritted his teeth. "Little Spade, do you really think we don't have anyone on our side?" With that, Lin Chintao charged over. Lin Chintao was Lin Chintao after all. He was fast, almost catching up to Bojio. Rao Rong followed suit. Rao Rong was impressive because of his ability to judge. For example, right now, he seemed to be able to predict where Spade Z would go, blocking in front of her. With troops chasing behind and Fatten in front, if he didn't think of something, he would definitely be surrounded. It wouldn't matter how fast Spade Z's hands were. More importantly, the audience had a bird's-eye view. They could clearly see everyone's position on the map. Qin Mo wasn't nearby. Would Big Spade still be alive? The hearts of the fans were squeezed tightly at that moment. Rao Rong narrowed his eyes, his fingers moving swiftly. The first wave of damage landed on Bojio. The damage came with a speed reduction effect. Spade Z's speed had obviously slowed down. As long as Lin Chintao closed in with a big move, Spade Z would definitely die. There was no way to escape from Spade Z's position since there was a wall on his right. Some couldn't bear to watch any longer. They tilted their heads. The shoutcaster frowned. "I'm afraid Lin Chintao's team is going to take that drop of blood." Before he could finish his sentence, the youngster's right hand moved in a snake-like motion, her left hand tapping at an astonishing speed. The three movements were seamless as she leaped to the right, passing through the wall and into the tower. With a second jump, she escaped the defense tower's attack, successfully escaping the encirclement. Even though she had lost half of her HP, it didn't affect her. The audience simply could not believe what they were seeing. It was because they couldn't imagine it. There was actually someone who used such a method to escape. Even in such a situation, someone was still able to maintain a clear mind and calculate the loss of HP. Perhaps the audience didn't feel much about it, but the two shoutcasters were stunned. It was obvious that jumping under the defense tower would allow her to escape the encirclement and save her life even though she would be attacked. But the most important thing was, who could be so clear-headed and calm when facing the encirclement of two great experts? Spade Z. This youngster, he was terrifying. F***, you actually went through the wall? Aren't you despicable? Lin Chintao was filled with regret. How could he have forgotten that little Spade had switched to an assassin? Even though the assassin didn't have an invisibility function, she could still go through walls. Don't go through if you dare. Chapter 898. With that, Bojio paused, standing at the base of her defense tower. She swept a wave of troops arrogantly before returning to the city to heal herself. F***. Lin Chintao wanted to fight back. "This is the first time I'm seeing someone more shameless than me." Bojio replied, "Don't worship me. Worship your head." Lin Chintao swept the tower. The audience could feel his resentment through the screen. The shoutcasters weren't in a good position. After all, the National League didn't seem like a proper competition with both of them. One of the shoutcasters coughed. Let's take a look at the replay." They definitely had to watch the replay. After all, the young man's dangerous jump could be said to be included in the game's textbooks. But that wasn't what caught Rao Rong's attention. At this moment, he seemed to have realized something, turning abruptly. Wilderness. Lin Shintao moved his fingers, switching the map. That was when he realized that the blue beasts that had appeared were gone. He didn't have to think to know who had stolen their beasts. There were only 4 of them in the game. All 3 of them had been there. Only Qin Mo. F***CK. Didn't you say you wouldn't steal beasts from our side? You guys are too shameless. Lin Shintao decided to take revenge. He turned and swept past Supreme Alliance's first red zone, wiping out all the beasts that needed to be killed. Bojio was starting to feel frustrated. Aren't you being immoral? Leave a red for me. Your captain stole our beasts, and you want me to leave a red for you. Lin Shintao was infuriated. Where's your professionalism? Bojio swept past a wave of troops. With Rao Rong around, it wasn't easy for her to leave the tower to fight with Lin Shintao. But similarly, because of Qin Mo, Lin Shintao only dared to steal 1 wave of beasts. Any more, and Qin Mo would appear. At the end of the day, Qin Mo was the most shameless. Without a word, he had stolen 2 beasts from their side. With that in mind, Lin Shintao added, "Little Spade, look at you. When you were surrounded by my captain and me, he didn't even care about you. He just came to my house to steal my kill. If I were you, I would jump ship right now. Go to another team and follow your captain. I don't feel safe at all." Just as he finished speaking, a voice suddenly rang out. Suddenly, a silhouette appeared on his left and swept past him. His ultimate skill locked onto him, and he lost 30% of his health. The main thing was that when he counterattacked, the figure had already moved to the other side. Needless to say, everyone knew it was Qin Mo. Lin Shintao had said those words to lure Qin Mo out. Now that he saw someone, he quickly went up to them. Rao Rong was in the bushes in front of them. Not only did he lose 1/3 of his HP, but he was also immobilized on the spot. Lin Shintao saw that the time was right. With a close combat attack, Qin Mo's HP dropped to less than half. Qin Mo's sneak attack isn't good. Sometimes, Lin Shintao's nonsense isn't useless. Rao Rong really can't be underestimated. Just now, if it wasn't for Rao Rong, Spade Z would have snatched the red and wouldn't have been chased by the opponent. Chapter 899. On the screen, the scene of 2 people chasing after one person was very shocking. The audience watched as Qin Mo's HP dropped to a critical level, as though he would be killed in the next second. Qin Mo wouldn't be able to escape even if Lin Shintao tried to kill him under the city defense tower. But at that moment, Qin Mo released a skill, purifying Rao Rong's control. The long fingers on his right hand moved swiftly, releasing the second skill, forming a circular sword formation that nullified the damage. With a wave of his long sword, his body flashed and he headed towards the wilderness, leaving behind a silver afterimage. It was a show-off. Seeing this scene, the commentator could not help but shout, "Beautiful!" Lin Shintao had already used his ultimate move when he was about to attack. There was no way he could catch up now. He could only watch as Qin Mo returned to the city. Moreover, he had lost half of his HP at the bottom of the tower. No matter how unwilling they were, they could only retreat. However, a figure leapt out from the bushes and instantly appeared in front of him, unleashing the most explosive attack. Lin Shintao's hand, which was holding the mouse, took a step back, knocking the microphone beside him. For such a commotion, everyone felt as if their throats were being choked. Not for anything else, but for the devilish smile on the silver-haired youngster's face as he moved the mouse. It was a murderous aura. That figure flew with the wind. His target was Lin Shintao. Lin Shintao gritted his teeth and used his skills, but he still couldn't escape the young man's hunting range. But Rao Rong was Rao Rong after all. The moment Qin Mo dodged, he seemed to have realized something. He charged into the wilderness and stood in front of Lin Shintao, using his ultimate skill to give Lin Shintao time to escape. Immediately afterward, he activated Swift Run and returned to the defense tower. This set of attacks was completed. Everyone could feel Rao Rong's ability as the best team controller. Seems like it won't work. The shoutcaster chuckled. Spade Z's pursuit isn't effective against Rao Rong. That's true. Another shoutcaster sighed. But this is a battle between masters. I really didn't expect Spadesy to come over from that place. If I wasn't watching from God's perspective, I would have thought that Chin Mo and Spadesy had discussed something beforehand. But now it seems like the two of them are thinking the same thing. They're on the same side, and it's really scary when used properly. Lin Chintao couldn't hear what was going on outside. Every contestant had to ensure that they could compete in peace. Every contestant had to wear a soundproof earpiece. When he returned to the city, he could feel his palms sweating, because Lin Chintao knew how shocking it had been. On the map, Spadesy's figure disappeared again. Chin Mo came out of the city center and headed straight for the jungle on the top lane. It seemed like he was going to kill some blue beasts. This time, Lin Chintao didn't rush forward. Instead, he darted through the bushes and sent a signal to Rao Rong. At this moment, Rao Rong had already returned to the middle lane. After leading the troops, he successfully took down one of the defense towers. The two of them attacked Chin Mo from the left and right. Lin Chintao only had one thought. Even if he couldn't take down Chin Mo's head, he could steal his beasts, so he wouldn't be able to grow stronger. Everyone knew that once Chin Mo got up, with his inhuman skills, no one would be able to control him. Even Rao Rong couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to stop Chin Mo's momentum. 3,000 knife cutting, killing within 10 miles, leaving no one behind. It wasn't just a casual statement. Hence, the best way to deal with Chin Mo was to kill all the beasts he needed. Lin Chintao grasped the opportunity to jump, using his jungling skills to steal his opponent's blue beast. Lin Chintao grasped the opportunity and jumped, using his jungling skills to steal the opponent's blue monster. Chin Mo moved away, dodging the attack and reducing most of the damage. With Rao Rong's precise skills, Chin Mo dodged and avoided the attack, reducing the damage. But even so, the beasts he needed were gone. With Rao Rong's precise skills, he stood in between the two towers, within the range of the defense tower's attack. Against such a level of control, an assassin with poor control would easily be killed on the spot. That was Rao Rong's true terror. Even an expert like Chin Mo had lost half of his HP. Lin Chintao also displayed his perfect coordination. Before Chin Mo, he reached the gap between the last crystal tower and used his big move to counterattack. Just a little more, and she would have killed Chin Mo, who was walking back. If Chin Mo hadn't put up a protective barrier, he would have been killed. His first HP would have been taken. Rao Rong and Lin Chintao's coordination is perfect, the shoutcaster exclaimed. Especially Lin Chintao's last move. It's a pity this game is all about luck. Since he returned to the city with low HP, it seems like Supreme Alliance is being suppressed. That isn't all. Everyone knows that Chin Mo needs blue beasts in the jungle to grow stronger. Without blue beasts, his big move is useless. A useless hero, regardless of how skilled his player is, won't be able to use the 3,000 knife cutting. Based on the current situation, Supreme Alliance isn't in a good spot. After the fans listened to such an explanation, every one of them seemed to be worried. Almighty Chin, who had been defeated by the 3,000 knife cutting, felt so aggrieved. It seems like Rao Rong is going to lead the tempo. Rao Rong's control is indeed a tough obstacle to overcome. If they don't break through Rao Rong's trap, they will continue to lead the tempo. First, they suppress Spadesy's hand speed and maneuvers. Now, they cut off Chin Mo's blue beasts. Only Rao Rong can execute such a plan. But come to think of it, even if Supreme Alliance loses this match, there's still the next team battle. That might be the case, but think about it. When has Chin Mo ever lost? Chin Mo hasn't lost because ever since that year, he hasn't met an expert like Xiangnan or a top player like Rao Rong. In reality, the problem is that when he meets an expert, he might not be able to unleash his full potential. Are you saying that Chin Mo's ability has weakened? You saw the chase just now? Be it you or me, the Chin Mo in everyone's memory can perform in a 1v5. If he hadn't activated his defensive skill, Lin Chintao would have taken the first HP. This is the second time he has escaped from the jaws of a tiger. Don't you think it's dangerous? The more Lin Feng listened, the more he felt that the shoutcaster hadn't played for a long time and only knew how to spout nonsense. He had escaped from the jaws of a tiger twice. Each time, he had been able to return to the city accurately, bringing along another wave of troops. Was his ability weakened? It was obvious that he had other ideas. Their captain had never played games in a straight line of thought, even though Lin Feng wasn't sure why his captain hadn't displayed his abilities yet. But he was certain that since his captain wasn't hiding in the map like before, he wasn't discovered. That meant he had other plans. As for what that plan was, with Lin Feng's naive brain, it wasn't easy to figure it out. But Yin Wuyao, who was experienced, was different. He seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly stood up and said only one word: dragon. Dragon? Before the audience could react to Yin Wuyao's words, a line of words appeared on the huge screen in the middle. A line of words appeared on the big screen, hanging in the middle. The Tyrant King has been killed by Spade Z. The Tyrant King was an extreme boss. The team that killed it would be rewarded with double the experience. But he killed the little dragon so early. It's still the same. I'm impressed by Big Spade when it comes to killing wild beasts and bosses. As someone who often gets killed after killing dragons, I really want to know how Spade Z did it. How did he kill the dragon single-handedly? Isn't he still in the early stages? No. Yin Weiyao listened to the comments around him, his voice heavy. It isn't the early stages for the little captain and captain. The reason why Yin Weiyao would say such a thing was because he had been observing the entire time. Ever since the start of the game, wherever there was money, there would be the youngster. Many people were wrong. The jumping back and forth wasn't for the first HP. It was for the economy. Regardless of the game, the more gold coins one obtained, the stronger one's abilities would be. Besides, equipment could only be obtained with gold coins. The character that the little captain was controlling had the ability to suck blood, so he could be used as a titan. This solved the shoutcaster's problem of the character's attributes being suppressed. Besides, the little captain had already taken down the dragon, so he didn't have to be afraid of the titan. The moment Bo Jiao killed the hidden boss, the Tyrant King, the shoutcaster was suddenly enlightened. The shoutcasters seemed to have realized something as well. They immediately got someone to bring up the financial comparison of the 4 contestants so far. That was when they realized that Spade Z's gold coins were in first place, followed by Qin Mo, which meant that Rao Rong's team seemed to have the upper hand. But that wasn't the case. The two shoutcasters glanced at each other, seeing the same shock in each other's eyes. There's the most important point. Yin Weiyao held a cigarette between his fingers. He was indeed an old man. Even his stance was typical of his generation. Ever since the start of the game, the little captain and the captain have never stood together, which means that they have been fighting 1 against 2. His last sentence, 1 against 2, was like a bolt of lightning, jolting everyone awake. If the shoutcaster had only been shocked. But now, they were completely shaken, because Yin Weiyao was right. Ever since the start of the game, both Qin Mo and Spade Z had been able to control the other two, gaining the time difference to allow the other to do what he wanted. For example, Qin Mo had wiped out the other party's jungle. For example, this time, Spade Z had killed the Tyrant King. If all of this was planned, then the two of them are really terrifying, the commentator murmured in disbelief. They didn't communicate at all, did they? Other than Lin Qintao's nonsense, Spade Z. Furthermore, those words sounded rather thick-skinned. How could they have thought of the same thing? There's no need to communicate in front of a true expert. Yin Weiyao held the cigarette in his mouth, looking slightly mischievous. Not to mention the two of them. The two of them. Every single one of them was able to set the tempo of the entire game. Even when they were fighting 1 against 5, they would be able to kill one of them and escape successfully. How could they only act on the surface when they were doing things? But how much trust did they have to use such a strategy? Spade Z's confidence in Qin Mo was understandable. Did Qin Mo have the same confidence in Spade Z? Did he think that even if the youngster was facing 2 people, he wouldn't be destroyed? It had to be said that such a thought was too presumptuous. However, they had really presented such a method to the public. Even if their fighting style was too domineering and they weren't convinced, so what if they wanted to develop independently? It was precisely because of their domineering nature that the cooperation between the powerhouses was different from the others. If Qin and Mo had been fighting one against two, the shoutcaster chuckled bitterly. I wouldn't have dared to imagine what it would be like if the two of them worked together. At this moment, no one dared to say that it was inappropriate for the two of them to choose assassins at the same time. Even though their formation wasn't compatible, it gave off an inconceivable feeling. Even Lin Chuntao didn't waste any more time focusing on the map. He knew it wasn't a suitable time to capture Spade Z because it would be difficult. Even if he managed to capture him, he would be able to defeat Spade Z in a one-on-one duel because of the disparity in their finances and equipment. But if their captain had followed behind him, he would have been able to kill Little Spade. Even if Little Spade's maneuvering was incredible, he would be able to do it as long as he was given an opening. But their captain had chosen Fa Tan. Under normal circumstances, Spade Z would have escaped before their captain had arrived. Lin Shintao hadn't expected their formation to suppress their opponent. At the end, it would reveal their weakness. They weren't as agile as their opponent. In other words, they couldn't kill as fast as the enemy, and they couldn't run as fast as the enemy. But Lin Shintao hadn't expected this. Qin and Mo had actually given up on the blue beasts in order to protect Little Spade. Unless Lin Shintao paused. The main attacker wasn't him, but Little Spade. Rao Rong had figured it out long before Lin Shintao could. But was this youngster really that good? Was Qin and Mo willing to assist him? That was Qin and Mo. However, the silver-haired youngster in front of the computer wasn't affected by the gazes. Her side profile as handsome as ever. After returning to the city, her fingers moved, flicking her black wrist guard. Her lips lifted. Her handsomeness numbed their hearts. Chapter 900. Just a few words. It was like a torch igniting everyone's gaze. For some reason, it made one's blood boil inexplicably, just because of the youngster's words. Some of them couldn't help but clench their fists tightly. They knew that the FC King of Zone C that they were familiar with was finally returning to his original form. It's coming, In Wuyao said. He placed his hands down, his eyes on the screen. On the map, Qin Mo and Bo Jio were like two arrows that had left the bow, skimming across the wilderness. They were shoulder to shoulder as they skimmed across the grass. They were so fast they brought up a gust of wind, neither of them falling behind the other. That kind of sharpness, be it Qin Mo or Bo Jio, their slender fingers moved extremely quickly. Because of the rapid tapping, in that instant, there was an afterimage that shouldn't have appeared. With Qin Mo's speed and precise positioning, the moment they left the city walls, it was as though they had disappeared from the map. That was the reason why it was so effective. It was because he was so familiar with the map. He was so familiar with every inch of grass that he could accurately calculate the distance between them. This was the reason why people said that Qin Mo was invincible once he got up, just as memory alone was enough to leave most people in the dust. Coupled with his hand speed and maneuvering, it would really make people tremble in fear. But now, Supreme Alliance had another fearsome person, Spade Z. Even Lin Chintao didn't dare to say he was alone with the youngster. After all, at this point, the other party's financial value was already double his. Hence, even if they saw Spade Z's silhouette, they wouldn't act rashly. From a certain perspective, Rao Rong was very smart. At this point, the battle in the wilderness was obviously disadvantageous to them. The other party had two assassins. Such a formation was completely jungle type. They moved quickly and were good at hiding. Hence, there was a saying that most hero players knew. If you weren't confident in your skills, don't chase after the assassin, unless you could control the stun from afar. But there was another point that they had to be wary of. In the hero game, there were many players who chased after the assassin and tank, especially in the wilderness. It was very likely that it was originally an ambush. Even if Spade Z was the only one on the map, there was no guarantee that Qin Mo wasn't there. The last two times, they had been solo. This time, they should be together. Rao Rong moved his fingers, taking a step back. His attack landed on the attacking troops. This was a signal. when Lin Chintao saw it. He wouldn't fight as recklessly as before, because he knew very well that there was no captain. Once he went out, it would be very difficult for him to come back alive. What's more, it wasn't a good time to fight head-on. Rao Rong and Lin Chintao's tactics have changed. Usually, at this time, the commentator would come out and give a few words. Another added, "It's not surprising. The difference in equipment is too huge." Rao Rong and Lin Chintao should have spent some money and taken advantage of the minions. That way, they won't be so passive in the team battle. Everyone watched as Qin Mo and Spade Z went out together. It was a perfect ambush. If Lin Chintao appeared now, the first blood would definitely be taken. But this was the National League after all. Both Lin Chintao and Rao Rong weren't weak in terms of maneuvering and thinking. If it had been anyone else, Bo Jio and Qin Mo would have already started killing. Because of their opponent's strength, they had used such a method to break Rao Rong's control. It seems like Supreme Alliance isn't as invincible as we imagined. But was that really the case? Very quickly, the shoutcaster realized his mistake. In the wilderness, Bo Jio and Qin Mo had worked together to wipe out the other party's wilderness. Especially when they were fighting the blue beasts, Bo Jio had raised her gun first, and after hitting the blue beasts, she had taken a step back, helping Qin Mo to kill all the blue beasts. The shoutcaster was stunned. Spade Z and Qin Mo are certain that the opponent wouldn't come to their wilderness. Is that why they are using such a method? They didn't seem to care if they were in their wilderness or the opponent's, or if there was any danger. It seemed as though none of these factors were within Qin Mo and Spade Z's consideration. Previously, the shoutcaster had been praising Lin Chintao's strategy. They had wiped out the beasts in Supreme Alliance's wilderness, suppressing Qin Mo from the roots. But from the looks of it, that strategy was useless against Qin Mo and Spade Z's official collaboration. Even if they didn't have the beasts, there were still some here. They could just snatch them back. Qin Mo and Spade Z were completely different from Lin Chintao. Their combined attack power was enough to kill the beasts in an instant. Spade Z didn't forget to lift his gun after wiping out the wilderness. He leaped over the wall, wiping out a line of soldiers. Then he went back to the wilderness, joining Qin Mo's attack. Were Spade Z and Qin Mo trying to do? The shoutcaster's fingers twitched when he saw the two of them heading towards the top lane. The director changed the angle, zooming in on the top lane. The audience watched as Qin Mo charged into the tower with a sword formation. He didn't care if he would be attacked by the defense tower if he started fighting under it. Without any hesitation, he headed straight for Lin Chintao. Amidst the silver light, Lin Chintao lost a third of his HP. His speed was also reduced by half a second. But it was this half a second gap. The audience watched as another figure leaped into the air with a long gun in hand. With a sweep, he lifted Lin Chintao, who had already been slowed down. His speed was incredible. Especially in that instant, the audience could only see the silver light from the long gun and silver knife. The silver-haired youngster sat in front of the computer, her hands hidden. The clacking of the keyboard sounded like the most exciting part of a piano piece. At this moment, the audience couldn't read the youngster's expression. Even in front of the camera, the youngster's side profile was covered by his messy silver hair, revealing only his slightly upturned lips. With traces of nefarious energy, he swept out with another big move. This time, Lin Chintao was really hurt. First, Qin Mo's big move had shaved off a third of his HP. Now he was hit twice by Spade Z. His HP dropped to a small amount in an instant. In that instant, there was only one phrase in everyone's mind: tower kill. While the troops were still there, Qin Mo used his sword formation to stun Lin Chintao. Then, Spade Z used his long gun to sweep the tower, using a critical strike. There was no gap in between. The two shoutcasters' eyes were glued to the screen. While their eyes were filled with shock, the audience exploded. F***CK. Spade Z's move is so cool. Little Spade and Almighty Qin didn't even communicate, but they were able to coordinate so well. That's scary. It is indeed frightening. The moment Qin Mo came out, the opponent's spade jumped in and used every critical hit on the blade. I wouldn't believe it if they said they didn't coordinate beforehand. That's because it's really too difficult to achieve this kind of cooperation. But more importantly, this is a tower fight. As long as Lin Chuntao survives, everything will be in vain. It doesn't matter how well Spade Z and Qin Mo cooperated. The audience was right. Lin Chuntao gritted his teeth, taking a step back before using his big move. If they weren't under the defense tower, Lin Chuntao would have been killed instantly. He wouldn't have had the chance to use his big move. But under the defense tower, he had a chance of survival. All assassins had low HP, so they were all in the vulnerable range. Once the burst was used, there was no need to stay under the defense tower. At this moment, Lin Chuntao used his big move. The health points of those who entered the tower would rapidly decrease, and they might even be killed by the heroes below the tower. Lin Chuntao wasn't just any other player. He knew he couldn't run at this moment, not even thinking about it. The moment he hesitated, he would miss the opportunity and be killed instantly by the enemy's tower kill. If it had been any other player, their first reaction would have been to run. But Lin Chuntao was Lin Chuntao, an assassin himself. He knew how to deal with such a troublesome situation. Even though he was low on HP, his gaze was resolute. With a big move, Spade Z's HP fell. That was the end of the cool tower kill. There was another problem. Lin Chuntao was at the bottom of the defense tower. He could use the defense tower's attack power to counterattack. But it was one thing for Lin Chuntao to be skilled, but Bo Jiu wasn't. Just as Lin Chuntao was about to use his second move, Bo Jiu swung her long spear, leaping out of the defense tower. She changed her angle and led the troops to attack the tower. That was too fast, too swift. It wasn't easy for Lin Chuntao to take the first kill. That wasn't all. The youngster's entire body exuded an indescribable pressure. Lin Chuntao understood instantly. He wouldn't be able to defend the defense tower. Besides, he was low on HP. It wasn't safe for him to return to the city. Both Qin Mo and Spade Z had crossed the defense tower. From the looks of it, there might be a second attempt. Hence, he had to run back. It might have taken a long time to describe, but in reality, it had only been 10 seconds since Qin Mo had cut in. Everything happened too quickly. Amidst the sparks, Lin Chuntao started to retreat with his HP low. The shoutcaster laughed. It isn't that easy. Qin Mo and Spade Z's teamwork doesn't seem to be enough to cross the defense tower. However, before he could finish his sentence, a silver-white clothed figure appeared on the screen, as if he had been waiting between the two towers. He dashed towards Lin Chuntao, who was returning to the city. Swoosh! A sword formation appeared. Chapter 901. First kill. Supreme Alliance's first kill. The audience couldn't react in time. After all, the player on the screen was Spade Z's side. When they heard the sound effect, they were stunned for 0.1 seconds. Who died? The director changed the scene immediately. That was when they saw Lin Chuntao's body lying between the two towers. Of course, there was also the tall figure standing between the two towers, his robes fluttering in the wind. Tower kill. They couldn't kill him by just one tower. They would have to cross 2 towers. That was the end of their teamwork. Qin Mo and Bo Jiu's teamwork would never end. The two figures were still on the map. The audience couldn't wait any longer. Hurry up and replay it. We want to see the replay. Indeed, the scene had to be replayed. It was too fast. Lin Chuntao was still sprinting back to the city when a sword formation suddenly appeared. A sword formation suddenly appeared over there without any warning. Even the silhouettes of people were so fast that they couldn't be seen. The silver glow was the explosive force from the clash of weapons. Blood splattered everywhere. Just like that, he took the first kill arrogantly. Lin Chuntao gritted his teeth. Despicable, you actually hid in the bushes beside the 2 towers, waiting for me to retreat so you could kill me. Isn't that the move you used on me just now? Have you forgotten it so quickly? Qin Mo's voice rang out, noble and calm. Lin Chuntao wasn't the only one who stilled, even the shoutcaster. The next second, Lin Qintao came alive. F***CK. Qin Mo, can you stop being so vengeful? I can't, Qin Mo replied as he moved his mouse over a blood-sucking beast, rejecting him calmly. At this moment, Bo Jiu swept her long spear. Not only was the defense tower destroyed, but even the soldiers were cleared by her. Bo Jiu thought to herself, Lin Qintao, aren't you kidding me by asking the Almighty to stop being vengeful? His greatest strength was vengeance. Bo Jiu, who had her dark history flipped, finally saw someone who was in a worse state than her. Hence, she approved of the Almighty's counterattack. His handsome face was incomparably serious as he killed. Lin Qintao wanted to vomit blood. When the two of them cooperated, it didn't seem like they were playing a game, but more like bandits. He didn't even give them a chance to breathe. At this point, Lin Qintao could already feel the pressure. But he was an assassin. If he were to back down now, there would be no way for him to continue the match. Thus, Lin Qintao didn't retreat. Instead, he charged forward to clear the troops. Rao Rong's fingers were a little dull, because he knew very well that at the start of the match, that guy kept saying that he couldn't be a burden to him. But the truth was that he was dragging him down. His hand speed was much slower than before, and coupled with his lack of understanding of Spade Z, it resulted in the current situation. He had thought that using the Titan formation would completely suppress the other party, making it impossible for them to rush over. But the consequence was that he couldn't keep up with Lin Qintao. If they couldn't keep up, it would be very difficult for them to cooperate. If the opponent was someone else, they would definitely win. But they were facing Qin Mo and Spade Z. They weren't just full of explosive power, they were adept at maneuvering and evading. They had even specially chosen characters that could leap over walls and towers. These skills would allow them to kill and escape at the most crucial moment. This had been a trap from the start. Chapter 902. Captain. Lin Qintao's voice came over. His eyes were a little dark. I'll work hard. Even now, he was still saying, as long as I can keep up with you, we won't lose, right? Captain? Rao Rong's gaze dimmed. He suppressed the emotions that were welling up in his throat, ignoring the vibrating phone in his pocket. He stared at the screen like an unwavering gemstone, standing there quietly. Yes, Rao Rong was a leader. It wasn't just because of his maneuvering and team control. It was also because, at times, just his presence could instill immense confidence. Lin Qintao was such a person. When everyone joined a team, it was because of the Almighty. It was all because of the Almighty's presence in the team. In that instant, when you saw his maneuvering, you would be amazed at how such a handsome gamer could exist in this world. To Lin Qintao, Rao Rong was such a presence. He moved his mouse, gliding past the line of soldiers, taking away a wild beast. The audience watched as Lin Qintao sped up. That wasn't all. Rao Rong walked out from the bottom of the tower, pushing the middle tower as though he had no fear. But upon closer inspection, it was clear. It wasn't because he wasn't afraid, but because of Rao Rong and Lin Qintao's positioning. Even though one of them was in the jungle and the other was in the middle lane, they were extremely close. It was almost as though they were advancing at the same time, completely different from before. But in this wave of soldiers, the tower was smashed into pieces. Even in such a situation, they aren't overwhelmed by the mental pressure as expected of a strong team. If it had been anyone else, they probably wouldn't have had the courage to come out. After facing Qin Mo and Spade Z's attacks, how many of them could reignite their fighting spirit? They even took the chance to destroy one of Supreme Alliance's defense towers. Seems like Rao Rong and Lin Qintao have her covered. To be honest, if it were me, I would have been disheartened long ago. Thinking about Almighty Qin's move just now, he crossed 2 floors. In other words, if he could do it once, he could do it a second time. It would be a psychological burden. That's right. It isn't just Almighty Qin. Even Spade Z is a player who can fight through the tower. If it isn't safe to stand at the bottom of the tower, it would be a little frustrating. But I realize something. As long as Rao Rong is around, it'll be hard for us to cross the tower and kill him because his mind control is really good. It's not a problem for him to stand under the tower, but once he leaves the tower, I can't guarantee his safety. As soon as this person's voice fell, everyone saw a white figure flash past, a silver gleaming sword formation rising, trapping Rao. A PK between the two captains. Everyone widened their eyes and stared unblinkingly, afraid that they would miss out on any details. 2 years had passed. No one knew who was stronger, Rao or Chin Mo. But looking at their finances, Chin Mo seemed to have the upper hand. Second drop of blood. The crowd cheered. What they wanted to see the most was the continuation of the hot-blooded battle. But Rao had never been one of the Supreme Alliance members. In the sword formation, he was forced to take a step back. Chapter 903. This control, it's beautiful. It was indeed beautiful. He had managed to immobilize Chin Mo. Fortunately, he wasn't at the bottom of the tower. If he was at the bottom of the tower, it was highly possible that Chin Mo would be killed. The effect of Rao's control was that all his moves couldn't be used. Moreover, it had a defensive function. The closer he was to him, the faster his HP would be depleted. Lin Chintao glanced over, using a big move to close in, wanted to take Chin Mo down. But Chin Mo was faster, activating the protective barrier. With a flash, he returned to the bushes, leaving behind a streak of silver. This time, Chin Mo's HP was low. Lin Chintao didn't give chase, because he knew there would be a follow-up. Indeed, there would be a follow-up. The next moment, a figure darted over, a long spear lifting Rao into the air. With a big move, half of Rao's HP was gone. At this moment, Rao was out of control. It would take more than 10 seconds for his control to recover. The figure was agile, not giving Lin Chintao any chance to get close. The moment he saw Rao, he dodged before turning back for another attack. Rao was still dead. Rao was left with less than a third of his HP. On the big screen, the silver light from the spear made it hard for the audience to see clearly. It was too fast, so fast that they couldn't catch it. The director changed the angle swiftly, switching to Spade Z's view. Only then did everyone clearly see the attack that the spear had launched. As the silver light streaked past, the silhouette also changed. Every move and every style was unbelievably handsome. But Lin Chintao's defense was already starting to drain the youngster's HP. The audience held their breaths. The shoutcaster was tense. It's too forceful. It was 2v1. No matter how strong Spade Z was, he wouldn't be able to kill Rao alone. Indeed, it wasn't possible because Lin Chintao was still in pursuit, restricting Spade Z's attack. Bojiu moved her right hand, dodging Lin Chintao's first attack, but not Rao's control. The youth was pinned down on the spot. It was a small matter that his HP was decreasing. What was more important was that once an assassin was pinned down and unable to move, there would only be one outcome: death. Spade Z shouldn't have gone up alone. Rao is Rao after all. Spade Z underestimated him. But was he really going alone? Not necessarily. In Wuyao noticed Chin Mo's finger. That momentary deviation. The next second, a silvery white figure appeared on the screen. He leaped out of the bushes and turned to attack. With a sword formation, he froze Rao in place. KO! Before Spade Z's HP was depleted, Rao was already lying on the ground. The second drop of blood. But the second drop of blood wasn't worth it for the Supreme Alliance. The reason was simple. Both of them were on the verge of death. Once Lin Chintao unleashed his ultimate move, he would at least be able to take one of their heads. Hence, Supreme Alliance hadn't won this 2-on-2 battle. Lin Chintao's eyes turned red. He sped towards Spade Z, delivering a critical strike. Blood splattered everywhere, and Spade Z collapsed just like that. The cheers from Supreme Alliance were stuck in their throats. The last time a youth had lost, he had also been killed by Lin Chintao. This time, history was repeating itself. The joy of obtaining the second blood was like someone had poured a bucket of ice water over his head, extinguishing all the joy that had welled up in his heart. Because at the moment when the youth fell, Chapter 904. It wasn't because Spade Z was weak, but because his opponents were getting stronger. Lin Qintao was no longer the same person from the regional competition. It was probably because he had the most suitable partner that he could fully utilize his advantages. Compared to Spade Z, he wasn't that much weaker. He had speed and positioning, especially with Rao Rong's control. It was a terrifying sight to behold. They could only pray that Almighty Qin could escape. But what confused them was that Almighty Qin didn't seem to have any intention of escaping. Why was that? Was he just going to fight Lin Qintao at such a low HP level? He couldn't win at all. Even Almighty Qin couldn't do that, right? What was wrong with Almighty Qin today? Why wasn't he playing according to the rules? Just as the audience was wondering, the shoutcaster raised his voice. One of the shoutcasters suddenly raised his voice. Resurrection armor. Spade Z has a revival armor. Revival armor, as the name suggested, was a piece of equipment that could revive someone on the spot. When playing a game, the person who set the tempo of the game would usually wear such a piece of equipment. Of course, in order to have such an equipment, one had to have enough gold coins. Could this be the reason why Spade Z has been plundering the troops, killing the Tyrant King, and even the beasts by the side of the road? The shoutcaster was in disbelief. Revival armor? Some of the audience who didn't understand were stunned for a moment, but Lin Qintao wasn't. But Lin Qintao wasn't a fool. After killing Spade Z, he realized something was wrong. As a veteran player, he knew what was going on. But no one had expected little Spade to have a revival armor. How did he get it? He didn't have it before. This was the question everyone was concerned about. Besides Lin Feng, the shoutcaster, and the entire audience. The director sat at the backstage directing, watching as the number of views reached its peak. Because it was a live broadcast, when the shoutcaster shouted those 3 words, veteran gods of the game sent luxury cars one after another to the live broadcast room. After all, this double fight was really cool. A lot of people wanted to know when Spade Z had released the resurrection armor. The advantage of watching a live broadcast was that while watching the battle, half of the screen was used to explain the equipment of the players. This time, the National League would be broadcasted live on all platforms. The broadcasting team was the most professional, and they knew what everyone wanted to see. He immediately pulled up the video of Spade Z. At that time, Spade Z was still under Rao Rong's control. The young man brought up the equipment changing page with his left hand and clicked the mouse with his right hand. He quickly sold his other equipment and used all his gold coins to buy the resurrection armor. At that time, Spade Z was still alive and had half a tank of HP. However, what they didn't expect was that the young man would change his attire at this time. Just how fast was his hand speed to be able to complete this action in an instant? Just by looking at the few pages that the young man had flipped quickly, one could understand. This was truly heaven-defying. After all, the audience on the other side of the internet was the audience on the other side of the internet. The scene here was the hottest. Many pairs of eyes were staring at the big screen, and even their breathing seemed to slow down. Time had clearly passed very quickly, but at this moment, it seemed to have been stretched infinitely. No matter how complicated Lin Qintao's thoughts were, his first reaction was to stab Spade Z on the spot. But his ultimate move was gone. It wasn't lethal enough. Players who were new to Hero always thought that the key to victory was how much HP one had. In reality, that wasn't the case. Firstly, it was the character's equipment and finances. Of course, most importantly, the difference between the two depended on whether the character you were controlling had a killer move or not. If it was used up, how was he going to fight? Besides, he was facing Spade Z. At this moment, the director swiftly shifted the camera angle. The youngster, who had been lying on the ground, stood up once more. Just as Lin Qintao was about to dodge, his long spear sweeping across, a silver flash. Within 10 meters, there was no one. Lin Shintao was already having a hard time dealing with such a silver flash. At this moment, Qin Mo, who was beside him, closed in, his clothes fluttering, his long sword like a rainbow. In an instant, Lin Shintao's HP was reduced to a critical level. Moreover, Qin Mo's move had greatly reduced his speed. Fortunately, the defense tower was just ahead. As long as he could reach the bottom of the tower, he would be able to escape this pursuit. At this moment, Lin Shintao's palms were drenched in sweat. Even his team members were clenching their fists tightly. Rao Rong was counting down the seconds until his resurrection. 3 seconds left. At this moment, Lin Shintao had reached the bottom of the tower, but had he really escaped? Just as some of them heaved a sigh of relief, they watched as the youngster leaped up, waving her mouse. Her left hand moved swiftly, her long spear piercing through the enemy before retreating swiftly. Behind her, only the silver flash of weapons and the dazzling sky were left. Tower crossing, kill. KO. When these 2 words crossed the screen, amidst the silver flowers, the long spear on his back, his sleeves fluttering, the youngster on the horse stood proudly, the silver light falling behind him. In that instant, many fangirls couldn't help standing up, holding their faces as they shrieked, Spade Z. Even the most handsome back view couldn't compare. Everything in the game became that person's back view. After killing the enemy, the youngster lifted his long spear, taking 2 slow steps forward before sweeping past swiftly, killing another wave of soldiers. The tower was destroyed, and the soldiers were dead. In this double fight, Supreme Alliance managed to take down 2 players. Both of them didn't return to the city. Instead, like 2 bolts of lightning, they split up into the wilderness on the left and right sides. They killed monsters to replenish their HP, as though it was planned. After sweeping everything, they regrouped in the middle lane. When they regrouped, the HP bar was already full. Even the shoutcasters stood up when they saw this scene. This year's Supreme Alliance, they were really strong. So strong that it wasn't within their expectations. Regardless of the commentator, they couldn't explain their fighting style. It was too illogical. There was no need for words, just kill. Even Qin Mo's fighting style was brand new, more lethal than usual. That was because he didn't have to worry about the entire field, he just had to fight alongside his teammates. Could this be the secret weapon that Feng Yi mentioned? The other club managers were starting to fall into a daze. They recalled Feng Yi's smiling face during the gathering, the words he had said while holding a glass of red wine. They had assumed that Feng Yi had poached Spade Z to anger them. From the looks of it, Wang Bang hadn't just been referring to the new king, Spade Z. Chapter 905. On the screen, the 2 of them had joined forces and forcefully destroyed one of the defense towers. After Rao Rong revived, he could only defend the middle tower. The defense towers on both sides had been destroyed by the troops. After the 2 of them split up, they attacked from both sides. Rao Rong couldn't go anywhere. It wasn't just wrong, it was too late. Was this Supreme Alliance's strategy? The 2 shoutcasters seemed to be at a loss for words, unable to utter a single word. At this moment, in the highest circle of the audience, a handsome man sat lazily on a designated VIP seat. A handsome man sat lazily on a special VIP seat. The visual effect was the best here, and he could see the big screen in front of him. Even the seat was more comfortable than usual. It seemed like this was the only way he could stretch his long legs. It wasn't an exaggeration to call him a handsome man. 2 buttons on his white shirt were undone, revealing his elegant neck. His face was extremely flirtatious. His silky black hair was tied behind him, but he didn't look feminine at all. Moreover, he was extremely handsome. Is this the person you wanted to see? The handsome man tilted his head, glancing at the person beside him with an arched brow. It wasn't anyone else, it was Hoshino. He had a gentle face and a natural composure. No matter what he saw, there would always be a smile on his face. Especially when he looked at Bojio, his smile would deepen, soothing like water. Tisk tsk tsk. The handsome man shook his head and turned to place his arm by Hoshino's side. Look at how sweet your smile is. Those who don't know might think you're related to someone else. You're just a little better at gaming. Hoshino tilted his head, looking at the handsome face inches away. Now you should know why I care so much about Supreme Alliance. Chinemo Spadesy, the handsome man, laughed, his fingers sliding across his chin. These two aren't bad. If I'm not wrong, Chinemo should be playing the same way as me. But you aren't looking at Chinemo. It's that person, the youngster with dyed silver hair. Hoshino, when did you learn to appreciate others? Hoshino took a sip of tea. Why do I sound like an arrogant B***star to you? You don't even know how to appreciate others? The pretty boy glanced at Hoshino, breaking into a lazy smile. All right, the competition is about to end early. The winner will definitely be Supreme Alliance. You saw what you wanted to see. Can you go back now? It's tiring for me to keep you company. Hoshino looked at the lazy man and stood up. Let's go. Indeed, it's time to go. If you don't leave now, I'm starting to wonder who you're going to fall in love with. Mainin put one hand in his pocket. Once he got up, he became even more domineering. With his background, he had never been a simple character. Hoshino was very clear about this. Hoshino didn't refute Mainan's words and was the first to walk forward. The pretty boy also took 2 steps forward. However, after that, he turned around sharply. His phoenix-like eyes swept over the silver-haired youth sitting in front of the computer. The corners of his mouth curled up, and there was an indescribable sense of danger. Just like a lion living in the grassland, it looked extremely elegant, but in fact, it was more difficult to provoke than anyone else. Spadesy, what exactly is in your body? Chapter 906. Everyone knew that this was the end of the match. The defense towers on both sides had been destroyed. The defense tower on the middle lane had been destroyed by Chinemo and Bogio. The difference in their finances was too great. Even Rao Rome couldn't stop them. But no one could deny that this was an exciting match. If not, the match wouldn't have lasted for nearly 2 hours. Even when they reached the bottom of the city, they didn't succeed immediately. He did not succeed immediately. The tug-of-war lasted for half an hour. At the end, Chinemo had used the revival armor. Bogio had sacrificed her life to take down the enemy's city. As the pieces fell, 2 huge words appeared on the screen. Everyone in the audience stood up. Lin Feng turned back and looked at Yun, who with his most handsome and brilliant smile. We won. Yes, Supreme Alliance had won. A 1v1 and 2v2 victory. Even if there was a team battle, it wouldn't affect the outcome. The shoutcaster was still in a daze. He watched as the youngster and Chinemo stood up. Their backs were always eye-catching and handsome. Coupled with their pure black uniforms, they looked like the commanders in the Star Trek movies. The shoutcaster finally understood what it meant to be the king of bombs. If this was the Supreme Alliance, they were indeed qualified to go up against Xiangnan. Lin Chintao was the only one who hadn't stood up in front of the computer. If he had been a little faster, as long as he had been a little faster, perhaps, if he had been smarter, the outcome wouldn't have been like this. Why hadn't he thought of the revival armor? Lin Chintao gripped the mouse tightly, his fringe covering his expression. But even then, the corners of his lips had sunk. At this moment, a hand pressed down on his head, a clear voice saying, "We can come back next year." It was Rao Rong, his chiseled side profile as though no matter what happened, he would always look the same. Lin Chintao couldn't take it anymore. He rubbed his nose and bolted upright, his voice muffled. Yes, seriously, in front of their captain, he was just like a loyal dog. Bogio glanced over. Her guard against Rao Rong had lessened. Instead, she could help Rao Rong with other matters. After all, that chatterbox Lin Chintao probably wouldn't want to see such a good captain leave. The team members gathered together. Feng Yi was here to deliver the news. No matter what, his lips were always curled into a sly smile. The results of the match between Xiangnan and Dream City are out. As he spoke, he glanced at his team members. 3 o'clock, Xiangnan wins. This result was not unexpected, and could even be said to be within his expectations. But ever since the start of the National League, Xiangnan's record had always been 3 o'clock. What caught everyone's attention was that not all of their starting members had appeared, which meant that they still had some strength left. Lin Feng's expression became serious again. We will also win 3-0 today. There was still a team battle. Regardless of whether Supreme Alliance had won or not, respecting the opponent was the best way to answer to oneself. Feng, he chuckled. Good luck. Many assumed that Supreme Alliance was competing with Xiangnan. In fact, ever since Supreme Alliance debuted, they had always been competing with him. In the esports industry, strength spoke louder than words. That was how they lived up to their youth. The atmosphere around Lin Shintao's team was heavy. His team members hung their heads, their faces filled with dejection. With the outcome already in their grasp, they didn't wish to participate in the third match. Rao Rong glanced over, pressing onto one of their shoulders. Do you want everyone to think that we don't have the magnanimity to compete in the third match? What's there to compete for? We have already lost. Li Nuo scoffed. You bragged about how amazing you were when you came back, but you still lost. Lin Shintao really wanted to stuff this young master back into the womb and reforge him. He would never understand that if it hadn't been for their captain, their team would have lost even worse. Did he really think that Spade Z and Qin Mo's teamwork was as simple as it seemed? Lin Shintao clenched his fists, wanting to retort. But a deep voice came from beside him. I was the one who dragged you down in the double match, but you have to participate in the team battle. It isn't about winning or losing, but if you give up the chance to fight, you will never understand what kind of team Supreme Alliance is. All the research and data are useless against them because they are stronger every second. That is Supreme Alliance. Rao Rong's gaze deepened as he looked at his team members. Are you going to be left behind? One of them bolted upright. I'll play. Chinua couldn't understand them at all. They were being unreasonable. Since he wasn't going to participate, he might as well let the little one he had bullied take his place. The little one was truly a newbie, his hands trembling as he held the mouse. However, esports seemed to have this kind of magic. Even though he was a newbie, he wanted to fight alongside the seniors of the team. He didn't care about the outcome. He just wanted to be worthy of the person who had once studied the Almighty, even when he was exhausted. The team battle began. For those who only cared about winning or losing, the competition was over. 10 kilometers away from the esports arena, in an apartment building. Ding! A message came from the computer. The tall and slender man closed the chat box, walking towards the sweet-looking girl. Rao Rong lost, and the money has been transferred. Shouldn't we prepare the sacrificial offerings? Let's wait a while more. The girl's fingers swiped across the screen, her lips curling into a sinister smile. Rao Rong didn't lose intentionally. Shock flashed across the tall and slender man's face. You mean, as expected, those who aren't of our race can't work together with us. The girl's voice became colder and colder. If that's the case, then throw him out first. The Major Crimes Unit is so strict, there has to be someone to bear all the blame. Go back and tell him, as long as he confesses to these crimes, I will avenge his father. This is his last chance. I don't have much patience. The tall and slender man chuckled. You should have done that a long time ago. A dog that isn't loyal to us will only bite us in the end. I'll get done now. This way, the crime squad's attention will be on Rao Rong, giving us a chance to sell our goods. The Golden Triangle is starting to get anxious. Do you think we should give Rao Rong a shot? It'll be easier for him to control. There's no need for that. Qin Mo will notice. The girl's face was filled with both love and hatred. That person isn't easy to deal with, you know that. The tall and slender man glanced up, his gaze deep. I'm afraid he won't be as formidable in the future. The girl turned back, looking at him. The tall and slender man continued. The higher-up said that the crime squad's newly hired senior criminal psychologist has arrived. That's good. The girl's eyes dimmed, the venom in them sending chills down one's spine. Oh, right. Have you found the person I asked you to investigate? The tall and slender man shook his head. As of now, no one has admitted to the cyber attack. That isn't all. No one knows who did it. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be such a powerful expert in China. Could it have been a coincidence that you were attacked that day? But it wasn't without results. Chin Mo seems to have an expert hacker with him, someone he poached from the public. As you know, his codename is Fatty, and he was in the mall that day. Perhaps he was the one behind it. Got it. Think of a way to flirt with Master Wu inside. The girl glanced at her nails. I want to know what exactly she did to make Chin Mo deal with the Wu family. More importantly, what information does she have on Spade Z? That's the only way to create trouble. I've said it before, if you want to destroy a person, you have to start with the people around him. This is the most important thing. The tall and slender man's gaze darkened. Don't worry, I'll do it immediately. The girl didn't say anything else. In her heart, she also felt that perhaps it was because of a moment of carelessness that she was locked onto that person's position. After all, no one in the hacker forum had admitted to it. It could have been Fatty. The girl didn't give up completely, using the internet to investigate further. She had investigated almost all the top few hackers on the hacker ranking board, but there weren't any clues. At this moment, the internet phone rang. It was the higher-ups. The girl lifted the corner of her lips and pressed the call button. This time, everyone earned well. Shouldn't you give us some convenience? Our goods have to be sold eventually. I called you to tell you about this. Now that the storm has passed, you can do as you please. If there's a sudden inspection, I'll inform you. How is it my business? It's our business. I've prepared everything on my side, including the people and the goods. We'll let the female students get involved first, and then we can open the market. You should know that young people these days like to play. Novelty is very exciting for them. Of course, I know that. But why did you suddenly come to China? If it's just for business, why did you create so much trouble? Using the murder case as a cover, just to earn money? This was a test. The person understood that some things should be done and some things shouldn't be done. The girl looked at the bags of white powder, her lips lifting into a smile. Of course it's to earn money. Using this to gradually control the entire country. That was the purpose of this operation. But of course, the girls wouldn't say anything. The person didn't probe further, just reminding, don't go overboard. Earn money, don't do anything else. The crime squad can only stall for a while. I understand, the girl replied. Don't worry, I don't like killing people. Watching them commit suicide. Letting that person know that not everyone in this world was humane. That was her motive. Chin Mo should have joined them a long time ago. Only by joining them would he be able to unleash his full potential. People like them were the ones standing at the top of the pyramid. Toying with the fates of others was the most beautiful thing. But that person always had his own insistence. Since he was insistent, she would destroy his roots at the same time in the city center. Director Huang's office. A person was sprawled there, holding a magnifying glass. He was of mixed blood, but because of his European heritage, he had a strong presence. He looked like a gentleman from the British aristocracy. His fingers tapped on the documents, and he quickly locked onto his target. That day, I think it's necessary to investigate everyone in the cinema. Don't you Chinese have a saying, you'd rather kill 1,000 wrongly than let one go? Director Huang thought, bro, where did you get your Chinese from? Besides, we are a country governed by law. We aren't violent. Mr. Smith, other than this, what else do you need from us? With his leader around, Director Huang still gave face to the foreign guest. Smith glanced at him. I heard you have a criminal psychologist here, and it has been almost a month, but there aren't any leads on Z. Since that's the case, I would like him to hand over all the authority to me. I don't mean to snatch anything from him, but I will take the lead and he will cooperate. That way, there won't be any problems. After all, criminal psychologists aren't able to keep up with us when it comes to certain things. When Director Huang heard those words, he really wanted to give Chin Mo a call. He would put the phone on speaker so that Chin Mo could hear how she despised him. These days, there weren't many people who dared to despise young Master Chin. So, Mr. Smith, you're saying that Z is the culprit behind this series of cases? MH, the foreigner replied. He pondered for a moment before replying. There is a 90% similarity in the crime, but I have to confirm the rest. I understood the situation before coming. Your criminal psychologist overturned my previous definition. He doesn't think Z is the culprit. I've crossed hands with Z more than 10 times on Fifth Avenue, and I know Z-style better than anyone else. Hence, we can't let our guard down. Director Huang, little Huang, didn't want to say anything else. He just wanted to call young Master Qin. Fortunately, the foreigner didn't continue attacking. Instead, he started with his analysis of the case. After listening to the entire process, Director Huang felt that this matter was getting deeper and deeper. He had a very bad feeling about this, but he couldn't put his finger on it. At 5 p.m., at the esports venue, the competition officially ended. As the victor, MVP Qin Mo had to be interviewed as usual. Chapter 907. Boju arched a brow. I'm just buying a bottle of water. Why do I have to leave now that I'm here? What happened to the basic trust between humans? Qin Mo glanced at the youngster before turning towards the bodyguard beside him. Buy a bottle of water for young Master Jiao. Yes, Boss Qin. The bodyguards dressed in black would usually disguise themselves as assistants and follow Qin Mo around. This was a decision made by Qin Shi's parents after that year to ensure Qin Mo's safety. Boju watched the bodyguard leave before turning towards Qin Mo. The Almighty obviously didn't believe her. Didn't he say that sleeping with him would lower his guard's guard? This reason didn't seem to work in front of the Almighty. The words on the internet couldn't be trusted. Qin Mo seemed to be done admiring the youngster's gloomy expression. He was in a good mood. What else do you want? I'll get someone to buy it. Water will do. Boju stuffed her hands into her pockets, a smile on her lips. She couldn't lose to the Almighty in a battle of wits and courage. But, Brother Mo, can you let go of my collar first? It wasn't nice to be dragged around like that. Qin Mo lifted the corners of his lips, looking suave. He inched closer to the youngster's face. I'll let you go when we reach the interview location. Qin Mo was a man of his words. But even if he let go of the youngster, he would still be within his sight. Hence, the interviewer couldn't help turning to look at the youngster that Almighty Qin had tossed onto the seat beside him. It was already the finals of the National League. Therefore, this interview was different from any other interview. It was conducted through a collaboration between the livestream platform and the media. It was akin to a mini livestream. Even though it wasn't long, it was at least 7 minutes. The host would conduct a simple interview with Qin Mo based on the questions raised by the audience in a live broadcast room. She had already done one interview with Xiangnan. Now it was Supreme Alliance's turn. The interviewer watched the youngster for another day. As expected, the atmosphere was different. Qin Mo might have said that he wanted to control her strictly, but in reality, other than the water, he had gotten his bodyguard to buy some snacks and toss them into the youngster's arms. Bojo was a foodie. She ate almost everything in sight. His appetite was also very big. At this time, his stomach was indeed a little empty, especially after a match. It was a little taxing on his brain. It had to be said that the Almighty was very considerate at times. Besides, Bojo had nothing better to do. Hence, she opened a bag, biting on a finger biscuit while watching the Almighty being interviewed. His silver hair was tied up by a hairpin, and his side profile was clean and handsome. There was a youthful smile on his lips, which was very seductive. He was completely unaware of how strong his presence was. The female host tried her best to pull her gaze back and clear her throat. After seeing the youngster, she was inspired. She changed the question she had prepared beforehand and said with a slight smile, Almighty Qin, after this competition, the internet is saying that you and Spade Z are the king of Supreme Alliance. When you two work together, it's like a pair of kings. I wonder how you guys managed to develop such chemistry? Is it convenient for you to tell me? Bojo paused in the middle of eating the biscuit when she heard her name being called. Her bright eyes and white teeth were indeed attractive. Qin Mo glanced at a certain someone who seemed to be in a daze, and a hint of a smile flashed across his eyes. He was a little black-bellied. When he looked at the camera again, his expression was neutral. We eat and sleep together. It's only natural that we have chemistry. The female host seemed to be in disbelief. She tried hard to suppress the urge to scream, pretending to be calm as she repeated, eating and sleeping together is indeed helpful in developing chemistry. But don't forget, this was a live broadcast. After Qin Mo said that, the live stream was flooded with comments. Oh my God, what exactly did I hear? The Almighty and Big Spade are living together. They eat and sleep together. I'm just concerned about how they sleep together, starry eyes. Wait a minute, did Almighty Chin look like he was looking at someone? I have the same feeling. Logically speaking, shouldn't Almighty Chin be looking at the camera during a live broadcast? Let's not talk about this first. Host, hurry up and ask, is Almighty Chin living together with Big Spade? I feel like I'm breaking up. What should I do? I just fell in love with a youngster. How did he end up with someone else so quickly? There were too many people asking the same question. Even if the host wanted to avoid it, she couldn't pretend she didn't see it. Besides, it was such a curious matter. The host didn't want to avoid it. Hence, she continued probingly. In order to improve chemistry, some team members would indeed stay together when they booked a hotel. They would also have 2 to 3 days of training to discuss strategies. Is it the same for Almighty Chin and Spade Z? No. It was a surprising answer. Chin Mo's face didn't change at all, as though it was an ordinary matter. We stay together. This time, even the female host stuttered. Live together? MH, Bo Gio frowned. When did this happen? Why wasn't she aware of it? At this time, the female host was so excited that she didn't know what to say. After all, this news was a real topic and benefit for some fans. The comments in the live streaming channel could no longer be controlled. Waves of The female host calmed herself down. Almighty Chin, you're saying that you're living together? Living together? You can understand it that way. Chin Mo's voice was calm. He stood there, exuding an air of nobility, especially since he was wearing a Star Trek commander's uniform. It made him look even more aloof. But he just had to drop such a bomb. It was obvious that she admitted to living together. This was not the end. When he saw the youngster stand up, Chin Mo turned his head. Even though his voice was faint, everyone watching the live stream could hear him. Wait for me a little longer. But in an instant, another wave of comments exploded on the screen. I was wondering why the Almighty kept looking in that direction. So there really is someone there. Did you hear the Almighty's tone just now? There's a hint of command in his pampering and connivance in his command. I bet $100 that the person beside him is definitely Big Spade. Another $100. I never expected Big Spade to be such a loyal dog. He even knows to wait by the side when the Almighty is doing a live stream. How obedient. Now, as long as I close my eyes, I can imagine the way those two people interact. One is doing a live interview, and the other is waiting by the side. I can feel their love through the screen. What should I do? They're all from the same team. Those CP fans shouldn't overthink it. Just stay close, or you'll just bring shame to your Almighty Spade. After someone said that the popularity would die down. However, Chin Mo could see the topics from this end of the live stream. His gaze paused on the last topic, his eyes darkening. Then he glanced over. The audience has already guessed that you're a listener. Come over and greet everyone. Listener, that means there really is someone else. The audience couldn't control their excitement. This time, Bo Gio couldn't leave even if she wanted to. On the other hand, all the reporters were shocked. When did the Almighty become so polite during a live stream? So passionate? In the past, the Almighty had never interacted with the audience. Unless there was a technical question, he would say it. The rest of the time, he would reply with an MH or I don't know. It was unprecedented for him to pay attention to the comments left by the audience. On the other side, the silver-haired youngster placed a hand in his pocket and smiled. I won't be appearing on the screen. Isn't this Brother Mo's personal live stream? The voice that was as clear as water came out. It wasn't impatient, it was a little deep. The audience's blood was boiling as they listened to this. CK, it's really my Big Spade. What did I say? Only Big Spade can make the Almighty like this. The two of them are even together during the live stream. I don't believe there isn't anything between them. Let me emphasize, I'm a straight man. This isn't convincing at all, but I really want to see Big Spade appear on the screen. The small screen during the competition isn't enough. With Almighty Chin's possessiveness, he probably won't let Big Spade appear. You better give up. It had to be said that this fan was right on point. Indeed, Chin Imo wouldn't let her appear. The reason why he allowed her to speak was to dispel the arrogant thoughts of others. He had already made it obvious enough. He couldn't wait to let everyone know. This person was his. As expected, after Chin Imo spoke, the people who had been warning the CP fans not to let their imaginations run wild disappeared automatically. In the next few minutes of the interview, Chin Imo would exchange a few words with a youngster from time to time. Someone asked, "Almighty, what is Big Spade doing while you're doing a live stream?" Chin Imo asked calmly, "Your Big Spade is eating biscuits." Some people started to imagine the answer. Thinking about the youngster's face, he would be handsome no matter what he ate. It was inevitable that they would be infatuated for a while. But this couldn't compare to the fact that they could see two male almighties at the same time in a live stream, even though one of them only revealed his voice and not his face. But in the eyes of the fans, this was already enough to satisfy them. After all, it was a combined interview between the two of them. This round of dog food wasn't too much or too little, it was just right. The live stream came to an end. The female host held onto the microphone. "Thank you, Almighty Chin, for accepting our interview. Thank you, Almighty Spade Z, for listening. I hope Supreme Alliance can bring us more surprises in the upcoming competition." Just like that, the interview ended. Bojio had mysteriously cohabited with someone. Movie Queen In, who was far away in England, was watching the video. At that time, she had been holding an apple in her hand. It was a must for all actors to maintain a perfect figure in order to act. But even so, when she heard her son's reply, Movie Queen and was shocked as well. Even though she knew that her son treated Gio differently, she hadn't expected it to be this different. Cohabiting? Her son, who had always liked peace and couldn't wait to be alone in a room every day. He was actually cohabiting with someone? Movie Queen and hung up her phone. Her nose was straight and her eyes were mesmerizing. But somehow, she felt that something wasn't what she had imagined. Would Chin Imo and Gio be too good for each other? That was Movie Queen and's only worry. Her eyes were filled with righteousness. In the end, she stood up and said to the person beside her, "Book a ticket back. I want to go back and take a look." "Yes, madam." She was also a mother. But when it came to Lin Feng, it was a different scene. He was still in his uniform and in the resting area of the esports arena. He held on his phone and promised, "Mom, I will take care of him normally. Don't worry about that." "How do you ask me to take care of him? Just like usual?" "Of course, we have to sleep in the same room." "What do you mean by don't go overboard?" Lin Feng's face was filled with question marks. Mother Lin didn't want to make things clear. Even if her son was magnanimous, it would be a waste if he couldn't solve this problem. The current situation was already very clear. Regardless of the competition, as long as there was a group activity that required the two of them to sleep together, his little rascal would always get a share with Yunhu. This was clearly her son's plan to get close to Hu legitimately. Mother Lin felt that she didn't know much about the situation and had to come up with a plan. You have a competition in 2 days, you have to work hard in this area. Also, when appropriate, maintain a distance from Hu. You are affecting Hu's search for a girlfriend. Got it. Lin Feng replied nonchalantly. In his heart, he thought, F***CK. I'm the one who's being affected. That fellow has never thought of finding a girl. But such words couldn't be said. Hence, Lin Feng could only endure it. Mother Lin continued, "There's one more important thing. Go ahead." Lin Feng looked like he was ready to listen to orders. Mother Lin's voice was deep. "Regardless of when or what you want to do, you can't lay a hand on Hu. Understand? That's all. I'm hanging up." Lin Feng listened to the silence, and the question marks on his face deepened. What was going on? Why did she warn him about such things? He was violent, but why would he lay a hand on Hu? In the past, his mother had never said such things. Why do I feel that there's something strange that I can't tell? Chapter 908. I'm going to the washroom to relieve myself. Bo Gio stood there, her brows arched. She seemed to be asking if he was going to ask someone else to replace her. This time, Chinamo didn't ask anyone to replace her. He lowered his gaze, his voice calm. Together, Bo Gio, the female host, hadn't left. More accurately, the interview team hadn't left. The live stream had stopped, and the cameras had been switched off. But they were still there. After listening to the conversation between the two of them, everyone present pretended to look to the side, but in fact, they had been listening all along. "Brother Imo, are you really going to watch me 24 hours a day?" The youngster smiled devilishly. Chin Imo swept her a glance. "I have to watch you carefully since you have a criminal record." Hence, in the Almighty's eyes, she was a criminal record. Bojio couldn't help but feel frustrated. At this moment, the man lifted her chin. Bojio had assumed that the Almighty wouldn't do anything in front of the audience. It was obvious that the Almighty didn't care about the people around him. "Can you eat until your mouth is full of biscuit crumbs?" Chinmo's voice was still magnetic and pleasant to the ears. Bojio lifted her hand, wanting to wipe it off. But the moment she lifted her hand, a cool sensation was imprinted on the corner of her mouth. The corner of his mouth was imprinted with a slight coolness, with the unique minty tobacco scent of men. The touch was incomparably familiar. Bojio stilled. Her dark eyes watched the handsome face that was inches away from her. They were so close that she could see the Almighty's enviable eyelashes. There was also that face that didn't require any maintenance, the noble aura, and the overly tall nose bridge. His pair of black eyes had a hint of gray in them. Bojio knew it was all because of the Almighty's mixed blood, but he was so devilish. Anyone who saw him would lose their senses, especially the Almighty's actions. Bojio could clearly feel the tip of his tongue gliding past her lips. It was like a feather giving off an indescribable feeling. Bojio's ears quivered. Where did the Almighty learn this move of kissing me without even greeting me? "All right." Chin Imo straightened, his fingertips still caressing the youngster's chin. He smiled. "Why? Do you want me to kiss you? Wait until there's no one else." Bojio felt even more depressed. On the other hand, the people from the interview group looked shocked. No one knew that when they saw that incomparably noble man bend down and gently kiss the corner of the young man's mouth, their hearts were in turmoil. That scene was indeed very beautiful. The two of them standing together were simply too compatible. But, Almighty, do you even care if there are people around? At this moment, Chin Imo turned around and glanced behind him. The people in the interview team were all in this circle. They knew what they should and shouldn't report. Whether it was for the sake of professional ethics or for the sake of their own future, they certainly wouldn't tell anyone what they saw. However, they had always thought that these relationships were just imagined by the fans online. After all, it was normal for team members to put their arms around each other's shoulders and live together. During the national competition, such special situations would indeed occur. They had followed young Master Chin for a long time, so they all knew how prideful he was. No matter how good-looking a man or woman was, they couldn't get close to him. Chapter 909. No matter what, kissing someone in public was too shocking. Just from the expression of the female host, it was obvious how much of an impact this matter had on them. Actually, even the bodyguard who had been by Chinmo's side for a long time was shocked, but he didn't show it. "But young master, what would madam and boss think if they saw you like this?" It was obvious that Chin Imo was declaring his sovereignty. It was probably because of a certain sentence in a live stream room. He might as well let the people in the industry know that this wasn't a figment of his imagination. This person belonged to him. His fingers stroked that smooth chin again. Chin Imo watched the youngster's eyes, recalling the way she had sat lazily eating her biscuits. She had been so obedient, and he had wanted to pinch her. It was clear that a light kiss wasn't enough for Chin Imo. He grabbed the youngster's wrist and walked towards the corridor. Bojio watched his movements. "What are you doing? Aren't you going to the toilet?" Chin Imo replied nonchalantly. He brought Bojio into a dead end. Bojio wasn't dumb. This didn't look like a toilet. But when she glanced up, before she could say a word, she was pushed against the wall. The next moment, a fragrant kiss came. This time, Chinmo's strength was obviously different. Reaching out, he pressed the youth's waist down and forcefully pried open those light pink lips, inhaling the sweet breath, not even letting go of the tip of the lilac tongue. Bojiu knew that she wasn't as skilled as the Almighty in this aspect. Her mind went blank. She couldn't tell where the numbness came from, but in that instant, her legs went limp. When the hands reached into his t-shirt, his waist trembled heavily. It turned into a puddle of water. Fortunately, after the kiss, the man caught her, moving closer to her ear. His warm breath was scorching. "You are really sensitive." Bojio's ears turned red, but she didn't have the strength to move. Chinamo seized this opportunity. He watched as the youngster's eyes turned red from the kiss. His eyes darkened, and he pressed her tighter against him. He gave her another round of deep kisses until the back of the youngster's ears turned an alluring pink. Chinamo then stopped. He pressed the youngster into his arms, his breathing becoming slightly heavy. Bojiu knew better than anyone else what it looked like when the Almighty was moved. Their breaths were filled with each other's breaths. The most awkward thing was that it was seen by the same person again. Lin Feng also felt that he really should buy a lottery ticket today to try his luck. Why was it that no matter where he went, he could see Little Spade and Captain kissing? The main thing was that the two of them acted as if nothing had happened. The captain glanced sideways and glanced at him. It was obvious that he was the one who had disturbed them. Bojiu had been feeling gloomy, but when she saw Lin Feng's frown, she broke into a smile. She lifted her hand and placed it on his shoulder, smiling playfully at him. Lin Feng felt that it was a provocation. Wasn't it just two guys kissing? He was used to it, and that was it. As a straight man, he had to suppress the discomfort in his heart in order to be manly and free. "Captain, the entire team has gathered, and we are heading to the nightclub to celebrate. They asked me to get you guys. Captain, you guys, come over once you're done kissing." With that, Lin Feng turned and walked away as though there was a terrifying beast behind him. Qin Mo retracted his gaze and placed it on the hand on his shoulder. He said slowly, "It seems like someone hasn't had enough kissing." Bojiu obviously knew who he was referring to. In order to prevent the Almighty from catching her again, she bent down sharply and leaped out suavely. Qin Mo glanced at his empty hand, his beautiful thin lips lifting playfully. He walked over as well. Compared to the previous time, Lin Feng's reaction was much more normal. At the very least, he didn't study Yun Hu. Supreme Alliance was rich. Everyone in the esports industry knew that. Besides, Supreme Alliance's style had always been to play however they wanted once they won the competition. Besides, they had a smiling director like Feng Yi. All of them boarded the commercial car and returned to the hotel for a short break before having a sumptuous meal. Next, they took the high-speed rail back to Jiang City. It was barely 10 p.m. If they didn't go to the nightclub at this hour, it would be a waste of their hard work. Those were Lin Feng's words. Supreme Alliance went to the Jiang family's territory, the most luxurious card room near the stage. There were more than 10 bottles of champagne opened. At the start, Shui Yaoyao didn't know they were going to this nightclub. It was only after he arrived that he stopped in his tracks. This was the Jiang family's business, after all. She knew a little. She was afraid she would see that person. Bojiu seemed to have sensed Shui Yaoyao's thoughts. She turned, her hands still stuffed into her pockets, arrogantly. There was a unique gentleness in her voice. "It's fine for everyone to come together unless the Jiang family doesn't want to do business. Or is there something going on between you and Jiangzhua?" Shui Yaoyao was stunned. She immediately denied, "No, nothing." She wasn't suited for lying. When she replied, her gaze seemed to waver. Bojiu was just testing the waters. She frowned when she saw Shui Yaoyao's reaction. Then she smiled. "Don't be nervous. I was just saying. Let's go and celebrate." Shui Yaoyao nodded. She was still a little nervous. There were some things she didn't want Her Highness Jiu to know. From the beginning until now, she had caused enough trouble for His Highness Jiu. This kind of thing was ultimately her own decision, so it was better not to say it out loud. But there was one thing. Shui Yaoyao said in a low voice, 2 days ago, when I was at the Jiang family, I heard that Miss Wu was investigating you. She even wanted to contact Almighty Qin. Your Highness Jiu, why don't you stay in the same room with me for the rest of the competition? I'm afraid that Almighty Qin will notice something." Bojiu glanced over and smiled lightly. The Almighty already knows. He already knows? Shui Yao Yao stilled. What? What was going on? Bo Jiao continued. There are also some spectators that came to watch the competition. Spectators? Shui Yao Yao's eyes were filled with worry. You mean the fans? What about them? Bo Jiao paused. They promised to keep it a secret from me. But some things will be revealed sooner or later. I still have to deal with Fu Zhongyi. Once I'm done with him. Bo Jiao paused. She glanced up and smiled. Yao Yao, it seems like this free brother of yours has many female friends. She was changing the topic. In the past, Shui Yao Yao's first reaction would be to look at the man surrounded by beauties. But this time, Shui Yao Yao could hear the hidden meaning behind Her Highness Jiao's words. What would happen after she dealt with Fu Zhongyi? What was she going to do? Shui Yao Yao wasn't stupid. She understood the meaning behind her words. She had always felt that Her Highness Jiao was different from the people around her. She didn't look like an ordinary high school student. She didn't look like one at all. But even if she didn't look like one, it didn't change the fact that she was a high school student. Because the Supreme Alliance members hadn't entered. Just then, Qin Mo's phone rang. It was a school director on the phone. The headmaster replied, tactfully, I guess that young Master Qin should have reached Jiang City after the competition. That's why I called to ask about your brother. In the second half of the second semester of Year 2, the school will require all students to stay on campus. Student Fu Jiao hasn't completed the procedure yet. Required to stay on campus? Qin and Mo frowned. In the male dormitory? The headmaster replied immediately, That's right. You lived there before and should know that the dormitory conditions in our school aren't bad. Even though it's 6 people per room, there's plenty of space. Qin Mo's voice was calm. It isn't convenient for him to stay on campus. The headmaster opened his mouth. But in the second half of the semester, the pressure from studying will increase. If he doesn't stay on campus, the night self-study session, I'll tutor him personally. Qin Mo's voice didn't change. He won't do too badly. As for the night self-study session, when will it start? I'll send him there and let him come back after class. Since young Master Qin had already said that, he couldn't find anything else to insist on. After all, young Master Qin was considered half a parent. He had even attended the parent-teacher conference previously. The headmaster hung up the phone silently. He couldn't understand why young Master Qin didn't allow student Fu Jiao to stay on campus. He was clearly a student who stayed on campus in the past. Qin Mo hung up the phone as well. He glanced at the youngster who was looking at him and arched a brow. Bo Jiao heard someone mention her name over the phone. Her thin lips curved upwards. She was too handsome. Standing in the middle of a nightclub, there were already many girls who were looking back. Qin Mo took in all the admiring gazes and scoffed in his heart. With such an alluring appearance, of course he couldn't put her in the male dormitory where they lived together. A certain someone was only suitable to stay by his side and watch him. That was indeed the case. However, the youngster seemed to be born for this kind of place. Her entire being blended into the darkness. In order to prevent any negative effects, the Supreme Alliance members had already changed their team uniforms to their private uniforms when they were in the hotel. At this moment, Bo Jiao was wearing a pair of white vintage jeans and a pure black t-shirt with a black hairpin on her head. Not only did she not look feminine, but she gave off an evil vibe. Needless to say, when someone glanced over, the youngster held the wine glass and lifted her lips into a smile. The curve at the corner of her lips pierced straight into the heart. Stay on campus? Even if she hadn't heard the entire conversation, Bo Jiao caught onto the key point. In her current situation, it would be easier for her to conceal herself if she lived in the school. That was because the campus network there could be shared after a skillful connection. Chapter 9-10. With that in mind, the youngster lowered her lids and drank a glass of wine. She was prepared to find a time to have a good chat with a certain director. After all, she was still the one making the decisions on whether to stay on campus or not. Fortunately, this group of people was too eye-catching. All of them were good-looking. Jiang Zhua, who was sitting at the far end, noticed them immediately. It was obvious that Feng, Yi, and the others didn't inform them beforehand. When he saw the familiar figure sitting behind them, Jiang's casually pulled out a bottle of wine from the ice bucket and strolled over to their card bag. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? This sentence was directed at Qin Mo, but he sat on Yao Yao's right. Shui Yao Yao, who had just relaxed, immediately tensed up. Even the wine glass in her hand paused for a moment. Fortunately, Jiang's didn't look at her. It seemed like he was just here to greet Almighty Qin. Qin Mo glanced over. Team gathering. What he meant was that it was different from other times. There wasn't much preparation. Jiang's chuckled lightly, the aura of a rich young master. It seems like you guys won. The next match will be against Xiangnan, enrich. Even though there wasn't much change in his voice, it was obvious that he was different in front of Jiang's compared to others. The two of them were brothers who came from the same courtyard, so they chatted casually. Shui Yao Yao saw that Jiang's didn't have any intention of leaving, and her breathing was a little tight. Because of the limited sofa space in the car bag, they were so close that they could smell each other's breath. In addition, his empty hand was placed on her long legs, so intimate. Shui Yao Yao's back stiffened, instinctively avoiding his action. What was he doing? Jiang's gaze turned towards her, extremely dark, as though he was brewing something. Shui Yao Yao knew what he meant. He was reminding her that time was up. Because it was Thursday, they had agreed on the day they would go to bed. Shui Yao Yao tightened her grip on the wine bottle. That was the reason why she didn't want to come back. Wasn't it a little amusing? He didn't have any feelings for her, but he wouldn't let her off in this aspect. But he also said that he was doing this to her as a punishment. As for what the punishment was, it was obvious. He hated her. Even now, he still hated her family for ruining his original life. Just as he said, in his eyes, whether it was her or her mother, they flattered his father just for the Jiang family's money. In some aspects, Jiang's wasn't wrong. His mother married Uncle Jiang because she liked him a little, but most of the reason was that the Shui family was inseparable from the Jiang family. As his mother said, Uncle Jiang could send his younger brother to a good middle school, which was very important to his mother. Hence, even though Jiang's wasn't easy to get along with, her mother didn't say anything and tolerated everything. Shui Yao Yao thought it was better this way, since it could lessen some of her guilt. But she saw him with another woman just now. She wanted to confirm something because she didn't want to ruin someone's relationship without knowing it. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.